councillors, the scrutiny members, or would that be Andrew?
Andrew, sorry.
Andrew, okay.
Yeah.
So over to you then, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Manager. The members of the committee who are in attendance this morning are yourself, Councillor Green as Chair, Councillor Alex Williams, Councillor Hussain, Councillor Pachella, Councillor Keith Edwards, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor Spanswick, Councillor Blundell, Councillor Julia Williams, Councillor Kay Rowlands, the Mayor, Councillor Ken Watts, Councillor Walters, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Mike Clark, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Nora Clark, Councillor Pam Davis, Councillor Collins, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Dendy, Councillor Tim Thomas, Councillor Beadle, Councillor Penhale Thomas, and the Cabinet members who are attending today are the Deputy Leader, Councillor Williams, Cabinet Member Communities, Councillor Young, Cabinet Member Social Services and Early Help, Councillor Burnett, Councillor Smith, Cabinet Member Education and Regeneration, and Councillor Patel, Cabinet Member Wellbeing and Future Generations. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, I don't think my name there was read out.
Well, apologies, Councillor Gifford as well.
Andrew was mine read out, Councillor Phil White.
Apologies if not, Councillor Phil White as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Meryl, are you going to make the first announcement regarding the status of the meeting?
Yes, Chair. As the meeting is a continuation of an adjourned meeting from last Thursday, the 21st, there's no need to appoint a chair. The chair will be the same as that meeting, Councillor Cheryl Green.
Thank you for that, Meryl. Right, welcome all members and officers to this continuation of the adjourned combined meeting of all Overview and Scrutiny Committees of the 21st of January 2021, which, due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will be held virtually with committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Can everyone ensure their mobile phones are on silent or switched off? Members will have received an electronic copy of the original agenda pack on Friday 15th of January. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times keep the cameras and microphones switched off, which will minimise background noise and interference. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting and will mute where necessary. If any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should speak using the instant messaging IM icon on the bottom left of the Skype window to type speak, and I will come to you in order I receive the request. Please do not use it to enter questions or comments. I will now ask the Scrutiny Officer to announce any apologies received.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Paul Davis, Councillor Bridie Edgebeer, Councillor Elaine Venables, Councillor Karen Webster, Councillor Gabby may be late. The Chair and Vice of the School's Budget Forum have sent their apologies, as well as the Leader. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have apologies typed in here from Councillor David Lewis and Councillor Matthew Voisey. Thank you for that. Councillor Howard Williams, you wish to speak at this point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to make you aware that I will need to leave the meeting at around about 12:10. I have a medical appointment I need to attend to.
Okay, thank you for that, Howell. Councillor John Paul Blundell?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a number of apologies. Councillor Gareth Howells, Councillor Stuart Baldwin, and Councillor David White, because he's at a fire authority pension meeting and he said I had to say that in the meeting. So thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. I note that Councillor Jane Gabby is also present. Okay, right. Are there any declarations of interest for if a member was not in attendance of the meeting on the 21st?
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, a declaration of interest. I don't know if it's personal or prejudicial, but I'm the chair of Bridgend Governors Association, which is an elected position, elected by governors of Bridgend. So I'm not sure what status is personal or prejudicial.
I would think it was personal, but I'm prepared to be corrected on that. Okay, thank you for that, Tom. We will make sure that we identify exactly which one it is. And I note that Councillor Tim Thomas also has to leave early. Right, we'll move on now, and can I thank everyone for their attendance here today, as it was short notice, and can I thank also the persons responsible for the additional information that was requested last Thursday. It is very gratefully received. Right, we have had a pre-meeting, so I am now going to move to education first, because I understand that the director needs to leave pretty shortly. So I'm going to move to the questions on ESF2, and the first one is from Councillor Ken Watts.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Yes, it is a question stroke comment. As we know, last week we had the tenders in for the school transport, of which there were 22. And my question is how robust are you going to be in examining these tenders, as amongst the 22 there are a number of new bidders, as I understand it. And I think with savings being paramount, we really need to look at the figures that are being put forward. So I'm looking for reassurance that there's a robustness about the selection process and that we get value for money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Watts. If I may.
Yeah.
Yes, so very happy to offer the Councillor assurance around that. It will be very much a robust process. Officers within Education and Family Support will be working very closely with legal and procurement officers to make sure that we are fully compliant with all processes around the tender process.
Thank you very much for that, Lindsay. Does that reassure you, Councillor Watts?
Yes, it'll be interesting to, yes, it's very brief but to the point, and I appreciate that. There's not much more that can be said at the moment, but I look forward to seeing what savings can be made in that area.
Yes, I noted that the director did use the term very robust, so I feel that.
Yep.
Happy. Councillor Rod Shaw, you have a question on EFS2?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was actually on the broader scope, if you like, of home to school transport. I appreciate exactly what the director's response has been on EFS2, but we have had a very long time where home to school transport per se, the wider thing, has been under some review, and it's an appeal really that you know, that is moved on so we can come for a better solution for all pupils, all parents and all residents within the county. So it's just a broad appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay, do you wish to respond?
Thanks, Chair. I agree with Councillor Shaw. It's obviously been a concern for some time. As all members will be aware, it's been a considerable amount of work that's gone into this for the last year or so. One of the things that we are hoping to see, as I indicated in last week's meeting, that is the Welsh Government review of several of these issues that we are dealing with, and that comes to fruition at the end of March this year. So hopefully then we will use that information in combination with the intelligence that we've secured, and then hope to move this on at pace.
Thank you very much. Do you wish to come back?
No, just thank Lindsay. I know how hard he works on all our behalf, and it is frustrating for us all, but I know he's there to do what he can. Thank you.
Thank you. We're staying with you now, Rod, on SCH1.
Scroll down a bit, excuse me. Right, yeah, here, you know, I had an issue, I'm afraid, again, with the balance of school budgets, and I think what I'm talking about is because we're talking about a MTFS that goes up to 2025, rather than make any changes this year, really it's a broad appeal to say, can we reconsider the efficiency saving, which would bring in £1 million, if you like, from the independent school budgets, but would relieve £100,000 pressure, 1/10 of pressure that has resulting in the loss of staff to these central education services, which are essential to all schools. So by cutting £100,000 out now, we damage potentially all schools, whereas 1/10 of the proposed efficiency saving on schools would actually mitigate against those. So for next year and further forward, I think we do need to consider at great length the efficiency saving. It may be not even 1%, but the figure could be agreed at some later date. But I do think we need to stop cutting central services as it damages all schools. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Councillor Spanswick now because he wishes to make a point on this same. John?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on the same point, well, nobody wants to make cuts anywhere. The pain needs to be shared everywhere, and I do feel that not making a cut, I'm not saying 1%, maybe even 0.5%, could make a major difference to other parts of the council budget where they are suffering and have taken a disproportionate share of the cutting over the years. And while formal education is important, so is the informal education, outdoors, parks, open spaces, recreation, the outdoor world, which our resources maintain that are being cut year on year. So the burden needs to be shared equally, and I think there should have been some cut this year.
You're on mute, Councillor.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm going to move to Reverend Edward Evans on the same point, and then Jane, are you on the same point?
It is, yes, indeed. Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
well, Reverend Evans first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The point I made during our pre-meeting was that if you look at the overall picture in Wales, for the last innumerable number of years, Bridgend has been at the lower end, if not the bottom end, of the scale in supporting education, the amount that's spent on education per pupil. And I think that any cut to the school's budget would be particularly disastrous, not only in this year, but in future years. It would mean the redundancy of teachers. It would mean all sorts of major problems for our children. And given the fact that we've got this pandemic and that we understand it will have an impact for a number of years on children's education, I think the last thing we ought to be cutting is the school's budget, the rest school's budget. So I think that's something that we do need to bear in mind. Our position in the overall table, as it were, in Wales. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Reverend Evans. And Councillor Jane Gabby on the same point.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, apologies to all my colleagues. I couldn't attend the pre-meeting. I was in a meeting with Julie James, funnily enough. And actually, I challenged her on the local government settlement that we've just received, and I appreciate all the distribution formula as well. However, what the Minister told me was that whilst it wasn't a growth budget, each authority should not be losing or proposing to lose any staff, because it should be a standstill budget. She said that if any authority says that they are going to lose staff, then the Welsh Government want to know immediately, because what they've said is that we're not viable going forward. So I appreciate what we've been asked to do, and I also appreciate all the different sort of variants about how we're going to do this. But specifically to education, one of the targets is the disposal of staff, essentially. So, you know, it actually makes reference to disposing of staff, and we cannot dispose of our staff, or we will be looking at special measures in our authority.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gabby. Right, I'll go back to the Director now for response to the comments so far.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, councillors. I really do appreciate your comments. I think it's fair to say, and this is not just for obviously my directorate, but for all the entire organisation, it's a very challenging picture. All the areas that we've identified are difficult. None of them are easy, and I think we've reached them after significant work. All the ones that we've put forward, and again, I welcome the additional scrutiny on these areas because we appreciate that they are challenging. We don't want to lose staff. We do have a lean team, as I mentioned last week, and we operate well below the national average with regard to the funding we have for centrally retained services. But again, I think everyone will be aware there is this balance to be had with supporting schools. The points that a number of councillors have made, and Canon Evans, with regard to the challenging financial position some of our schools are in. Obviously, we're mindful to support schools through the difficult times that lay ahead. But also the balance is maintaining that central service to provide the support, as Councillor Shaw has said, for all schools. Obviously, I will need to reflect upon the comments that Councillor Gabby has just made, because again, it's the first I've heard of that from Welsh Government. And again, that would be something I would be happy to consider with colleagues in Corporate Management Board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Reverend Evans, EFS 7 wasn't actually raised as one of these, so whereas you can make reference to it at the end of the meeting, we are currently going through just the budget proposals that were requested for extra information. But by all means, when we come to recommendations, if you wish to.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I think that we are now finished with education. Lindsay, thank you very much. I understand you have to leave, so I've got no more indications on the points that were raised last Thursday.
Thanks, Chair. As always, any questions, I'll deal with them as soon as I can. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move on now to SSW2. And I have three questions here for the Director. And can I thank the Director and whoever was responsible for the very fulsome response and additional information that you provided for us. Right, I'm going to move now to Councillor Ken Watts, and he has a question on DFGs, etc.
Yes, thank you, Chair, once again. Yes, in the narrative, which, as you explained, was very full and informative, there's a target mentioned of £225,000, and examples were given where some savings can be made in hours. In the Cabinet report that went before Cabinet on the 19th last week, it was to bring in-house provision of adaptation to improve independence within the Disabilities Facilities Grant. As always, I published the leaders' précis of that on my local Facebook page, and I received a number of responses back from individuals who had obviously been in receipt of adaptations to improve their independence, and relatives were saying that when those adaptations are no longer needed, they have inquired about what to do with them, and they are told to dump them or destroy them, or in other words, get rid of them. And the question is there no way that this sometimes expensive equipment can be refurbished and reused, thereby saving the authority money, especially now as there's a move to bring matters in-house? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts.
Yeah.
I'll move to the Director now, because although I have three questions, they're on different areas of this. So would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Watts, for the question. I think disabled facilities grants are a key example of an area where, by investing in a service which is more preventative, we can reduce ongoing care and support needs. And I think the case example within the paper sets that out very, very well. I think the point you make about how we can make our service, by bringing it in-house, and working in partnership more efficient is a really good one. I know lots of examples across Wales where there's a really positive and proactive approach to recycling equipment. Some of it is very bespoke to individuals. Other equipment can be sort of refurbished and cleaned and all the rest of it, and be put to very good use going forward. So I would be really interested to see the data about how well we're doing that at the moment, and if there is scope for us to do more of that, then I think that's something that we should build into our performance targets for the services we bring it in-house.
Thank you, Leader. Can I just say, well, that's good to hear, Claire, and I wondered if you could keep me up to date with the progress you make within that then, please.
Yeah, so certainly in partnership with my colleagues in housing who are the lead on delivery of DFGs.
Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leader, Chair.
Thank you. I now move to the second councillor, Councillor Pam Davis, who's actually got a question on, I think it's Park Prison care packages.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. A number of years ago, when we were made aware that we were responsible for the care of the prisoners and the packages that were put in place, some of them quite horrendous, because I think 4 times a day was one who was severely disabled, and he had to have specially adapted equipment, which obviously had to be measured for, etc. He was an out-of-county prisoner, so he didn't come from Bridgend. And we asked about equipment. Did it go with him when he went? It was actually Caerphilly, when he went back to Caerphilly. And I understand that that council has to pay us money for certain items. And we were told, well, no, it doesn't go on. It's just put in a cupboard. And as you rightly said, sometimes it is adapted for the individual. So I'm quite concerned if that still goes on, because you know yourself, these items of equipment are very, very expensive. They probably don't take that much to produce, but they do put the prices on. Anything to do with first aid equipment or anything is very expensive. And I wondered if you could have a look and see if that practice is still going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the question, Councillor Davis. I think members are clearly highlighting here in both of the questions desire for more information about equipment, how much equipment we're issuing, how much of that equipment is bespoke to individuals, be they in the secure estate or in their own homes in the community, and how well we are then reusing and recycling that equipment. So if I work with colleagues to prepare a briefing note which sets that out, and then as I indicated in the answer to the previous question, then I think we need to question whether we're being as efficient and effective as we need to be in this area. And it might be, if there is further to go, that there are some financial consequences of that, but certainly we'll get all the data together in this area.
Thank you, Claire. Are you happy with that, Councillor Davis?
Yes, very happy. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. Right, the last question I have here now on this particular directorate is from Councillor Ross Penhale Thomas on sustainability.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I would echo your sentiments just before this piece in welcoming the additional information. Claire, thank you to you and your team. Please, more of this in terms of the case studies as we go forward. It's all too good for us to sit here talking about really large numbers in terms of savings, facts and figures. Talking about real people brings it closer to home, and I found it really helpful to just get a bit of a steer on that. So please, more of that going forward. So in terms of the case studies, they provided a background which was really useful, and obviously there are savings or cuts to be made in the directorate. I'm thinking more strategically moving forward, what is the sustainability of these sorts of savings? And I say it in the context of age. Age isn't just a number. Age comes with issues, and more often than not, those issues can be complicated. In one particular case study, we're talking about 2 particularly young people. And I'm just wondering what is the sustainability of these cuts going forward, considering that the likelihood is that people's conditions will deteriorate and they are likely to need increasing help from the local authority. Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Claire.
All right. Thank you, Ross. Over to you, Claire.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor. I think if we reflect back to prior to the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, the white paper that was the precursor was called Sustainable Social Services, and this has been the dilemma for many, many years, really. We're an ageing population. Age comes with a range of disabilities and, you know, increasing frailty and need for care and support. And in addition to that, our demographics in terms of our younger population, we've got children with disabilities coming into adulthood who require quite significant care and support over their lifetime. So it is a you know, position that requires, I think, very sophisticated planning and needs analysis going forward. So doing all the right things, which hopefully the briefing paper set out about understanding people's strengths and capabilities, reducing reliance on having all your needs in terms of all the outcomes for living your life from commissioned care and support, because people with disabilities and frailty, the same as all the rest of us, want to live in good quality accommodation, want to have occupation, relationships, and all those things which don't come from commissioned social care. So I think understanding that increase in our populations, undertaking those needs analysis and assessments, and planning and commissioning services going forward with a really detailed understanding of the needs of our population, not just now, but into the future, is very important, because much of what we do in social services is cost avoidance as much as it is around cashable savings, which can contribute to the bottom line of the local authority. And so what I would say back in answer is that one of my priorities coming in as a new director is to make sure that we have really well evidenced strategic plans going forward across all the main population groups who require care and support and have got a need for care and support, which looks at the increase in our population, looks at all the things that we need to do to meet those needs going forward in the most cost-effective way, which also happens to be the way which achieves the best outcomes for individuals. And supporting that, there will be business cases which either require more investment or can continue to see reductions in the cost of services going forward, but it will differ from population to population. So we've got a growing older population. Our younger populations of people with disabilities will require different business cases around the sorts of services that we need to develop to meet their needs most cost effectively. So I know that's a bit of a long-winded answer to what I think a very, very critical question actually is against our population. How much more can we continue to do by working in this way, and when does it become a situation where the business case supports further investment?
Thank you, Claire. Councillor?
Chair, if I could just come back. Yeah, very much appreciate the director's answer, very thorough and fulsome. I'm just seeking an assurance, really, that where people's circumstances change, you know, people's circumstances don't change via the calendar year or the financial year. So, for example, thinking of the two, in the context of the two case studies, were there circumstances to change next week, would or is the local authority in a position to help them with another care plan, which may cost more, which in the roundabout way of things actually eliminates the cuts or the savings that the department would make. So it's a really difficult one to circle, but I'm just seeking assurance that we are in a position to be able to support them and review. I know we provide small thousands of care plans, but that we're in a position to regularly review them based on people's changing needs. Thanks, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ross. Did you wish to come back, Claire, or you?
I wish to come back just quite succinctly, really, to provide that assurance. We regularly review. We review at least once a year, but certainly more frequently as needs change, and care packages will go up as well as go down. What the savings represent is the quantum, is an overall net reduction.
Thank you, Claire. Right, I've had indications now from two councillors. First, Councillor Jane Gabby, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Claire, can I thank you and your officers for our briefing paper? It was very helpful and very informative in the first regard. And I suppose that I fully support the review of the functions. However, I would like assurance, just like previous councillors before me, that not only would the statutory review be undertaken more frequently, but that the staff providing the service have the ability to make those recommendations, because currently they don't. And also, I'd also like some reassurance that any nursing provision, the tab is actually picked up by the NHS rather than us under our care provision. Because what's home care and what's reablement, I know are two different things, like you do as well. But in the meeting that I've just had with Julie James, I think one of the things that we need to bear in mind is under the white paper that she's proposing is not only do all care sector staff have the real living wage, but any commission services also have that real living wage, and it will also be on the same spectrum as an agenda for change for the NHS, which will have significant cost implications for us. So as long as we keep doing those reviews, then yes, we might have more a demand on our services, but the provision that we have to provide would be more limited. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you wish to comment, Claire?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's always interesting times working in social services. Very interesting times, and as Councillor Gabby has just referred to the white paper that was published very recently, which is out for consultation, I think recognises, as we said last week, the absolute value and the importance of the work that the direct care workforce do on all of our behalves. And I strongly believe that the direct care workforce are experts in what they do. And if they make recommendations that somebody either needs a little bit more or a little bit less, then that's really important, because they spend day in, day out with people with care and support needs, and they know that person very well in making those recommendations. So I think that's the first point that I would like to make. I think the second point then comes to that relationship with health. Obviously in Bridgend we've got integrated teams and very good joint working between community nursing staff, particularly our social workers, our OTs in the community, which means that we are able to take that holistic approach. There are always, for as long as I've worked in health or social care, been tensions at that interface between organisations about who becomes responsible. But if we get the practice right and we work in that strength-based way across the health and social care spectrum, we're in a far better position with our health colleagues to do what matters and to get the right care packages with the right contributions across partner agencies. And as I think we move forward in Bridgend and look at what further integration means, some very important discussions will be needed with the health board about their contributions to keeping people safe within communities, because a lot of the things which drive our social care costs are underlying health needs, such as in areas such as continence, etc. So it's supporting them to invest in the right services which can reduce the cost overall across sectors.
Thank you very much, Claire. Do you wish to come back, Councillor Gabby?
No, thank you. That's great. Thank you very much, Claire.
Right, thank you. I now have Councillor Janice Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I must apologise for not attending the pre-meeting. And thank you for the breakdown, Claire. I've much appreciated that and the detail that you gave in it. And it's very nice to see that the care needs are re-evaluated. And thank you for the case studies. And the answer that you've given to Councillor Ross Penhill-Thomas is very gratifying to know that you can achieve when the needs are up or down. That is great. Thank you very much indeed. So I'm very happy with what I've seen today. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Right, that concludes all questions on SSW2. So thank you very much, Claire, for your attendance here. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to questions on the COM1 proposal, and the first councillor I have on this is Councillor Julia Williams.
Hi, thank you, Chair. As someone who is suffering during this pandemic from lack of fresh air and open space, I think we'd all agree that maintaining our parks and open spaces has never been more important when we emerge from this nightmare. I'm very concerned there seems to be a little bit of a veiled threat. Transfer to CAT or charges will go up. My Stake Park and Newbridge Fields were mentioned. Do we know that the committees, for example, who run these places, has an appetite to transfer to CAT? My worry has always been and still is that many of these clubs, parks, etc., not only don't have the money, but neither do they have the expertise or appetite to do everything themselves. And surely, isn't that why we as a council exist, to provide these services? So my question is, I'm particularly concerned about employing a consultant, Just Solutions, to review my Stake and Newbridge Fields. We all know how much these so-called consultants cost, and it's usually astronomical. So I'd like to know what the cost is, and do we know that they have an appetite to transfer before we employ somebody to look into it? Both these parks are jewels in BCBC's crown, and I hope they will be looked after and supported. So my question is really about the consultant and whether or not they're entirely necessary.
Thank you for that, Julia. Would the director like to respond?
Yes, of course, happy to, Chair. Right, thank you, Councillor Williams. That is indeed a very good question. I think what is important is that when we are looking at CAT transfers, and to answer a first question, everybody, all parks in the borough have expressed an interest in looking at the CAT process. That's the first thing. But when we are looking at them, particularly for complex sites, large sites that have got multiple uses on them, such as My Stake Park and Newbridge Fields, it's important that we take a very close look at what would be involved with that CAT transfer. And currently, we have taken some consultancy advice on this to make sure that we're getting everything captured, and that's the reason for that, really, because we need to take a very detailed look at these areas in particular, to know the full cost implications, to understand the operating lifetime costs of those facilities, and to ensure that if they were transferred, CAT transferred, and there is interest on both, that they're done in the right way. An important part of the CAT transfer process, well, the most important part really, is the detailed business case that goes behind it, and ensuring for financial sustainability, and also that the skills are there for operating those parks and maintaining them into the future, because as you said, that's incredibly important to make sure that these facilities are kept in the standard that they would be expected to be kept and are kept open for the public. So important for us is that we don't just check they're financially stable, but all of the support is there to ensure they can be operated, of course all the equipment and the costs that go with it, and not just the fields themselves. What we have to remember is there's a whole maintenance regime that goes with them, there's lots of equipment that goes with them, plus there's lots of buildings as well, such as pavilions, etc. And lots of work with things like statutory compliance. So there's a tremendous amount of support that is done by the team to help these communities prepare these business cases, very thorough examination before any CAT transfer takes place. But with regard to My Stake and Newbridge, it was felt, Newbridge Fields, it was felt that we needed to have more detailed work undertaken on those two areas in particular, that we didn't have the capacity or resource to undertake currently in the council, to ensure that the business case for that was robust and that we understood fully what was involved. I hope that assists, Chair.
Thank you very much, Janine. Much appreciated.
So what was the cost of employing Just Solutions?
I'm afraid, Councillor Williams, I don't have that cost to hand, but I can email and ask that question, and I may be able to get that to you within this meeting. If not, I can get that cost to you outside of the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Janine. I've got an indication of a question on this from Councillor Ross Penhill Thomas.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to the Director for that answer to Councillor Williams. I share some of Councillor Williams' sentiments in terms of the expertise, the appetite, the resources that exist within the community. Obviously, it's been proven that it's worked wonders in other places, and I really do hope that it works elsewhere. In terms of Maesteg Welfare Park, and the same can be said from Newbridge Fields, I don't want to put words in the Director's mouth, but I think she's probably referring to it as a logistical nightmare in terms of the large entities that they are, which is possibly one of the reasons why the consultants have been employed. I'm just wondering, if this doesn't come to fruition, what is, if any, the local authority's de facto or fail-safe position on these two, as Councillor Williams mentioned, jewels in the crown of the county borough? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Ross. Would you like to comment on that, Janine?
Yes, of course, Chair, happy to. If, of course, these two areas are not CAP transferred, then they will remain in the management of the Borough Council, and we will look after them in perpetuity. But we're hoping that we could get some arrangement for a CAP transfer. But of course, these are large sites, very complex. There's an awful lot to get through to ensure that that CAP transfer is appropriate and can be managed in the right way. They are difficult sites. If that doesn't happen, of course, they will remain with the Borough Council.
Thank you very much for that, Janine. Councillor Richard Young would like to respond as well to this question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wanted to come in specifically about Newbridge Fields, to be perfectly honest with you, but the same can be said of Maesteg Welfare Park, is the fact that the complexity of the CAP transfer for these areas is due to the fact that, especially in Newbridge Fields, for instance, some pitches overlap each other. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the two management committees of those particular clubs, and I'm thinking particularly of Bridgend Athletic Rugby Club and Bridgend Cricket Club. So there's a lot of work in that area. There are other teams as well that play at Newbridge Fields, such as Bridgend Sports. There's the Athletic Club itself, the Road Running Club. And that's just Newbridge Fields, but the similar sort of situation exists in Maesteg Welfare Park, and I think that's why we needed to understand the complexity of it. In answer to the question, what would happen, Janine is quite right. The object of the strategy that we employed was to make savings. Savings are becoming apparent, and I think the clubs themselves that are entering into CAP transfers are beginning to see the benefits of those transfers. But I think it's fair to say that while there is an appetite with the clubs on those two areas, if it's impossible to transfer those, then we will be in a position to support those clubs. But that doesn't mean to say that savings won't be made. So I'm quite confident that we can find a way forward on these two complex areas, and I can reassure councillors on the appetite of the clubs that actually do involve themselves in those two areas.
Thank you very much, Richard. Councillor Lynn Walters has indicated. Is it a supplementary on this particular question, Lynn?
It is, Chair. Yeah. Thank you.
By all means, then.
Thank you very much. It's really I welcome the outside consultants because I appreciate that we don't have sufficient capacity in-house to deal with Newbridge Fields in particular. But I am concerned, as I've got a standing declaration of interest about being a Bridgend Town Councillor. I have seen the brief to the consultants, and no way on that brief does it actually mention the consideration of Newbridge Fields being a floodplain. And so I am concerned that the consultants' report, they may not have the expertise of dealing with floodplains, and so it's whether the recommendations that come from them will actually include those costs as well that will definitely be paramount within Newbridge Fields. So it's just making sure that we do get full recommendations from them that take into account all of the negative sides of and the very important sides of the site, not just the positive of future income generation. Thank you.
Thank you. Janine?
Yes, yeah, I can provide assurance for that. Absolutely. The floodplain issue is a very important issue as part of this brief. Whilst it may not have been involved in the tender, it'll be one of the first things that's discussed with the consultants when we look through the maps and the topography, when we look at the area of those parks. It'll be one of the most important considerations for that scheme. So just to assure you, that'll be included.
Thank you very much for that. Right, I'm going to move now to Councillor Alex Williams, who has a question on Conwen. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, you caught me a bit by surprise then, but
You're next. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll ask my general question on usable reserves. I know that since the beginning of this council, Jill has been very careful in managing the council's financial sustainability, and that we've got around about £66 million in reserves. Now, I understand that you don't necessarily use these usable reserves to prop up annual budgets and use them for expenditure on different directorates. However, it would be useful for perhaps the Cabinet Member for Finance and Jill to comment upon whether they feel that the usable reserves should be used in this time of uncertainty, and because we're in such a crisis, to cover some of the reductions in the budgets which we're having to face, and whether they feel that 22% of annual expenditure held in reserves is sustainable going forward.
Thank you for that, Alex, and presumably you're referring to Conwen. Yes.
Chair, do you want me to pick that up?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure whether that. I think we've moved off COM1, haven't we? This is a different question. Is that okay for me to come in now, or do you want to finish COM1?
It was a question that was generated because of the response to COM1, Jill, but you could make a general response to it by all means. That would cover COM1. Thank you.
Okay. I won't comment on COM1. I'll leave that very much to Janine and my other colleagues. So the short answer to that is no, I don't think that we should be using usable reserves. And I'll just go through a couple of the figures actually that might be helpful, if I may, because I think it'll help in members' understanding. So the 64 million that's referred to is the figure currently, which is made up of just over 9 million of council fund and 55 million of earmarked reserves. So whilst it looks like a big figure, you've heard me say this before, and I know Councillor Williams is very aware of this, that 9 million in the council fund is absolutely in line with our MTFS principles, and you'd expect me, I guess, to just remind members that you've approved a set of principles. There are 13 of them, and MTFS principle 9 refers to the council tax, and MTFS principle 8 in terms of the reserves, and they were approved by council as part of the MTFS, and they're reiterated in various documents that council get. They've also they were revised last year through BREP and then through approval by council. So you'll have heard me say it before, the council fund is in line with that principle. It's 5.27% of the net budget, excluding schools, and the principle says it should be at least 5%. So we're only just above that 5%. In terms of the earmarked reserves, a lot of those are supporting the capital programme, about 20 million. about another 4.5 million supporting asset management, minor works, repairs, demolition. The COVID fund was 3 million, that's now 2.5 million. We transferred money into an emergency fund, most of which has already been used, I should add. And then obviously we've got grants and equalisation accounts, which is another 4 million, and we can't spend the grants on anything else, otherwise we'd have to repay that back to the Welsh Government. And the rest is on council-wide reserves, major claims, service reconfiguration, insurance, etc. So from my point of view, earmarked reserves are what they say on the tin. They're earmarked for a purpose. And we look at these probably nearly every month in finance. We certainly report them through the quarterly budget monitoring, and I've been very, very vigilant in terms of unwinding any reserve that hasn't moved or is no longer necessary. And I'm happy to go into as much detail as members want on the earmarked reserves. The auditors look at them very closely. They would raise a query if they weren't needed, or they looked as though they were just set aside for something very general. They're absolutely vigilant on them. Our schools balances are incredibly low, as we know. And so I wouldn't, in terms of, firstly, our NCFS principles, no, we can't do that. Secondly, I would never advocate using reserves on a one-off basis, and certainly not this year, because we are getting a lot of money back from the Welsh Government at the moment, money that's been provided an additional because of COVID. And so we have got future years that we don't know how hard the challenges are going to be. So whilst I understand members looking at that sort of figure would think that is usable, it's not usable. So I'm happy to go into as much detail as you would like. I don't know whether Deb wants to add anything to that, but Councillor Williams, does that help?
Yes, Jill, I just thought it was a good opportunity for you to set that out for members who weren't familiar with that kind of process. I suppose it is still a political choice about whether you do hold that level of reserves, in that I think Bridgend are 7th highest out of the 22 unitary councils in Wales. But yeah, I think that was really helpful in setting out why reserves are held, held in reserve. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Williams. Now I have an indication here from Councillor Keith Edwards. It's on this particular point. Is it COM1, I mean?
Yes, Chair. It's coming back to parks and playing fields, if I could. I welcome the reply from both the officer and the cabinet member. Some further clarification, I think. If the fallback position is that these both Newbridge Fields and Maestig Welfare Park remain the responsibility of the local authority, if this very complex feasibility study doesn't come to fruition, then can I ask for clarification on the level of maintenance that will be sustained? Will they stay at the level they are now, or will they go back to the fallback position of having very little maintenance and be left as public open spaces? Because saying that we will keep them without saying how they're going to be maintained is not a very clear answer. So could I have that answer, please? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. Unfortunately, you didn't come up in time to ask that question before we moved on, but I'm quite happy for the Director to respond to that, and then we'll go back.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I can respond to that, Councillor Edwards. We have a maintenance regime currently throughout our parks, which is funded in the budget going forward, and that is where we would be for the current year. We would continue with that regime as planned if they were not transferred. Of course, I can't speak about future consideration, because of course we will have to look at that as and when we move on with our budgets, but to ensure that we will, one thing we really want to do is keep our parks in the condition they deserve to be in, of course, but against our backdrop of financial austerity, it's incredibly difficult. So if they did remain in council ownership, and if the CAT transfers were not successful, they would have a comprehensive maintenance regime as they do currently on those sites for the next year. What would happen after that, of course, would depend on budget settlements and what we agree with, and that would come back for any scrutiny, I would have thought. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Edwards, are you happy? Your question has been...
No, that's the answer I was expecting, Chair. Obviously, that
yes.
Going forward, there's no guarantees as to whether we'll be able to maintain those parks and fields to the standard that we would like, and that was the answer I was expecting. Thank you.
Councillor Young, is it this question that you wish to respond to?
Yes, please, if I may, Chair.
Yes.
It's a very brief intervention, I assure you. It's just that, just to assure Councillor Edwards that certainly we have a responsibility to the clubs, and the leagues that these clubs actually do play in expect a certain standard, so it would have to be kept up to those standards at least. But Janine, oh sorry, my dog has gone bonkers. Janine is absolutely correct in as much as we would have to review the situation on a year-on-year basis because we really don't know what our financial situation would be. We don't know how Brexit is going to affect us. We don't know how the COVID pandemic is going to affect us. So are we going to see, for instance, the reintroduction of austerity? We really don't know. But we would keep monitoring the situation and liaise with the clubs.
Thank you for that, Richard. Right, I will now return to the previous theme, and in the pre-meeting, it was the next person I had to speak on this was Councillor John Spanswick, followed by Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the detail. I say detail, the further additional information we've been provided with. First thing I'd like to say is Janine says that all clubs have expressed an interest, and as I've said before, I think all clubs have expressed an interest because we're basically told if you express an interest, we won't increase the fees, but if you don't express an interest, either the fees will go up or we can then close in sites. So it's going to be at the moment everybody's interested, and I don't disagree with the CAT process where there are clubs or committees and those organisations that are keen to do it and are able to do it, and it works. It clearly doesn't work in the large open spaces like Newbridge Fields and my stake, because in I think the report that was done maybe 2 years ago, I think 60% of those areas are used for informal recreation by the general public. So I'm not quite sure how you end up then charging a club to pay maintenance for areas that use the general public. So in that respect, the process is flawed. Not blowing my own trumpet, but I've got 39 years experience in parks, green spaces. I've offered some experience to the cabinet member in the past. I've been to 1 or 2 informal meetings and shown figures on screens and PowerPoints, but never been sent any hard data, which now perhaps explains why, because we've shown average figures for football pitches based on, it's not the true cost for a football pitch or a rugby pitch. It's averaged out. I thought, I'm sure I was shown figures before, that we had individual costs per site. Because if we haven't got individual costs per site, as those sites transfer by CAT process, how can that amount be removed from the budget if we don't know the amount? It's worrying that I think this service is no longer resilient. We are now at the stage where we have to employ consultants to do the work that about several years ago, staff employed there would have been done. But we've cut the service to the bone It's now no longer resilient. So we spend, there's been consultants involved with the park section for years, I think, as far as I can see. And I've offered my services free of charge, but they've been turned down. And I've now got other things to do. But it's disappointing. The wording again on threats to close children's play areas, I think that should be removed, because we're talking about investing in children's play areas. It's in the capital programme for next year. And you know, the football pitch costs 3,600 and a rugby pitch of 5,400. A rugby pitch is naturally larger than a football pitch, but it doesn't cost me £2,000 more to maintain. They are so flawed, these figures, they should be put in the bin. We should get accurate figures per site. It's disappointing we haven't got them anyway. We've been maintaining parks and open spaces for many years, and there was a lot of staff employed in the service, and it's really disappointing where we are today. The CAT process is flawed for clubs and individual groups that are feeling forced to take them on, and I think this 300,000 should be removed. It's only a target, and any savings that are made should be reinvested in the service for our future parks, open spaces, our future generations. And before Jill says where we can find the money, well, it's a percentage of what it's a percentage of 1% of the council tax. So maybe the council tax will have to be a fraction more to make sure we look after our future parks and spaces. A lot more I could say. And as I say, I've offered my services in the past, but they've been turned down, and now we're paying a fortune to consultants.
Thank you, Councillor Spanswick. Would you like to respond to that, Janine?
Yes, of course. Yeah, Councillor Spanswick, I understand your concerns, and I know that you have had discussions with the team over many years over the CAT transfer process, and I understand that you do have experience in this area as well. I do understand that, but let me just assure you, if I can, and I'm not sure that I can actually, but this is a very robust process, the CAT transfer process. That, as I've said previously, it's not compulsory. It's something we would encourage clubs to do because it gives them more control over their fields, but only if they are able to do so, and if they're set up in the right way, and if they can make this financially viable. And that is an important part of the process. There's a detailed business plan that goes behind every CAT transfer, as I'm sure you well know, and no CAT transfer would take place legally if we didn't have all of those processes in place, and it would protect both the club and ourselves and the interests of the public in looking after the open space. So first of all, let me try and reassure you that. I know that you are very interested in a detailed breakdown of the figures. We are running at a lower than normal resource. We are dealing with pandemic management as well. The team are very stretched currently, and we're not able to give you detailed figures yet. Just to assure you, we have got consultants in to assist us with my stake and the Newbridge Field site, because we know we need some more detailed information on that. That was only why we would do it. We wouldn't ordinarily invite them in this area. But I'm content that the process we're undertaking is robust. Every CAT is looked at carefully, and nobody would be asked to undertake a CAT if the club were not ready and not minded and not willing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Janine. I'm going to move now to Councillor Ken Watts, and then I've had an indication from Councillor Howell Williams and also from Councillor Richard Young, who I'll bring in when Councillor Watts has asked his question and you can respond. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I said earlier, I think my question dovetails or is an adjunct to what Councillor Spanswick has been saying. In the note of response received on the paperwork at Com1, it says there that clubs can maintain facilities at costs significantly lower than BCBC. So has BCBC been irresponsibly inefficient in running these previously? Because if the costs were known to be high, then why weren't they reduced earlier? So, you know, if savings were known where they could be made, why weren't they made earlier? So it's just the word significantly lower caught my attention, because if they're that significantly lower, then they should have been dealt with earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Janine, do you wish to respond in particular to Councillor Watson? Then I'm going to bring in Councillor Howell-Williams and Councillor Richard Young.
Yes, of course, yes. Let me assure you, Councillor Watts, that is not the narrative that goes behind that comment. The comment is, as a borough council, everybody's paid their wages, they get pensions and all of the add-on costs, and we use staff and we use them across a range of sites. Staff are paid to work across a range of sites. So when we take it down to one particular site in particular, it would be more expensive than whether a club would, for instance, undertake a grass cut with machinery they own, as opposed to the council, who would have to move machinery from one part of the borough to the other, whose employees paid at a council standard rate and has all of the protection that being a council employee brings with it. So it's not that the council services are inefficient, absolutely not. I would thoroughly defend that. We're incredibly efficient and incredibly lean. And that's some of the issues that we have currently. We're so lean, there's very little resilience. It's just that using club staff and also a tremendous amount of volunteers when it comes to cap transfer, you can significantly reduce the costs of running those clubs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Janine. Councillor Watts, do you wish to respond?
No, thank you.
That's fine, Councillor Watts. Thank you for the question. Yes,
okay, yes, I thought the answer would involve the salaries and the pensions. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to move to Cabinet Member now, Councillor Howell-Williams.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The meeting has moved on somewhat now from when I indicated I wish to speak. It was around the question on reserves. I've nothing really to add to what Jill have said, but only to give some assurance, I suppose, from my perspective as a member, that we do constantly review the earmarked reserves, because they are for known, predictable pressures that we are facing, and we try to set aside an appropriate sum. Now, sometimes that sum is more, sometimes it's less. But by the time it's known, there's quite often another pressure that we need to sort of account for. So that process is under constant review. And in my meetings with the finance team, we certainly make sure that there's an appropriate sum there to cover a known pressure. And if we are able to unwind some, then we certainly do put on the pressure to try and unwind that, to keep that that pot then as true as possible. When it comes to the general fund, obviously we are in line with the Wales audit recommendation, and that principle is set annually by council. So I won't be certainly advocating that we reduce that sum below what is recommended by Wales Audit Office. So with those few remarks, I hope that satisfies the members. But as ever, I'm always open for any questions to be thrown at me at any time via email, and we can have a dialogue. And anyone who wants a greater understanding of how the finances work, then please do get in touch with me. On that point, Chair, it is now nearly 12:10, and I did indicate that I have to leave. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak, and sorry, I must now leave the meeting.
Oh, thank you for your attendance, Howell. It's much appreciated. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the situation with the CAT transfers and whether the system is flawed or not, I don't particularly think the system is flawed, to be honest with you. I think, yes, we have certain problems that we've got to look at in Newbridge Fields and Maesteg Welfare Park. And it was highlighted by Councillor Spanswick that many of these facilities are used by members of the general public, not just sports fields. Well, that's part of the complexity. That's what we're looking at. That doesn't mean to say the system is flawed. It means it's complex. It's as simple as that. But I have to say that we were in a situation at that time that due to austerity, we were not able to maintain those facilities going forward, and it was going to get worse going forward, to the point where we wouldn't threaten to the clubs with closure of those facilities. Those facilities would close themselves because they would not be meeting the standards of the clubs or of the organisations that those clubs represent. So we looked at the situation and offered the clubs a way out, if you like, and they took it. And I think the majority of clubs are now seeing the benefits of that. So I don't think the system is flawed. I think in some areas it's complex, but I do believe that our decision at that particular time has allowed these facilities, and especially the ones that have been taken over by cat transfer, to remain in the public domain. They would have closed themselves, otherwise they would not have been able to be used in that fashion. And on that basis, the decision was correct because they are maintained within the public domain.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Young. Right, I've not had any indication of any further supplementaries. I'm now going to move to Councillor Sorrel Dendy, again on Com1, but a different perspective. I think it's from Town and Community Council perspective. Sorrel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In Com1, there's talk of reduction of grass cut areas, maintain parkland and a number of children's play areas. To start off with the grass cutting, since the time I've been a councillor, I'm sure beforehand, there's been a want from town and community councils to be involved in BCBC on the scheduling of grass cutting at least. I know that community councils, because they are closer to the areas, they understand what areas do want to be, the public want to be cut, and what areas don't. So there could be a small reduction over this time already just by having that information. Town and community councils do understand that there is going to be a need and a pressure put on them to take over some of these services that BCBC can't afford anymore. But the communication with them has still been minimal. For example, as well with the play parks, I know that there was talk before about maybe a community asset transfer of play parks, children's play parks, to town and community councils. With this reduction of maintenance, how much reduction would that be? Because I know that there's already very little extra work done on those play parks in most areas anyway. So will it be a case, if we have had for some community asset transfers for parks and playing fields, that the neglect of those areas due to budget pressures, I understand that, but will they be down then to the lowest safety requirements they can be, so when town and community councils come to take them over, they've got a bigger burden on their shoulders? And yeah, just in general about having that conversation with town and community councils going forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. Janine?
Yes, of course, happy to come in. Yeah, I appreciate your concerns, Councillor Dendy. Of course, yes, any transfer of any maintenance of grass cutting play areas and or grass cut generally would be discussed with the community councils, and of course that would need to be reflected in their settlements, their financial settlements from the authority as well going forward, and we would gladly have those conversations with you should you be amenable to doing that. With regard to health and safety, we don't want to compromise at all on who would, and especially when it comes to children's play. So when we talk about a minimal level, there isn't a minimal level, there's a standard for health and safety, and that's what we will adhere to. A bit different when it comes to grass cutting, of course, because that doesn't present the same dangers. But with health and safety on children's play, there is a standard and we will meet it. There's no moving away from that standard. They have to be maintained, and that's the standard we will be expecting. But yes, back to your original question, we would be very comfortable to have conversations with town and community councils if they so wished, because I think local intelligence in areas is really important. Actually, you probably understand how areas are used and where some areas would benefit from more cuts than others. So we would welcome those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Janine. Sorrel, do you wish to come back?
Yes, thank you. You know, I do appreciate the response I just had back, but I also know as somebody who sits on the town and community councils, 2 years ago, we asked for grass cutting schedules to be sent out to all town and community councils so we could help in this matter because we understood the situation in BCBC and wanted to help out in that way by giving local knowledge. As far as I'm aware, at least the community council I sit on and the others I know about, and I'll declare an interest in that in Garabally Community Council, we still haven't received that information. And I just think it's really important. We in BCBs, we try to work to a one council approach, and I think that also needs to go to the town and community councils as well. We're willing. We've accepted the fact that, you know, they've accepted the fact that they need to pick up some of their slack and help with the burden. And I think it's really important these conversations continue. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dendy, and thank you, Janine, for your fulsome response there. I've now got Councillor John Paul Blundell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Janine, on Wednesday and Thursday, Zach said, when we asked Zach about the breakdown of the 300,000, there isn't a breakdown of it, basically. He said there isn't a breakdown of it, and so we can't say, well, we'll cut this, and that will make it up. So how achievable is the target then? Because if there's no breakdown, and if CAT transfers don't go ahead as much as we are expecting because of COVID, because teams haven't got the same amount of funds as they used to, or did have two years ago, how achievable is the target in the long run going forward to this year?
Chair, would you like me to come back in?
That would be fine.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Blundell. Well, as we have said, this is a target that we're aiming for. We have a number of CAT transfers currently that have been undertaken. We're working on them. Our target this year is very ambitious, actually. We'd like to see whether we can get another 10 CAT transfers through the system. Of course, whether we do or not will depend on those business cases, whether we get the right information in, whether we're comfortable, plus the clubs are comfortable to continue. So that's our target. And so if we do get the majority of those CAT transfers through, then we should be achieving that target. Now, we'll monitor this as we go along in the months, and should we, by the summer months, realise that it's not able, for whatever reason, to get those over the line, then we will need to look at trying to achieve that saving through reduction in maintenance of the grass cut, etc. But as it stands at the moment, we would like to achieve that saving through the CAT transfer, and that's our main point for the saving. The team are working incredibly hard. We've done lots of great CAT transfers that have come through. We've got experience of doing it now, and people are seeing the real benefits actually of the CAT transfers, and I think maybe that is why more people are coming through and are willing. So what we need to do is to see how many we can do this year. We'll monitor that closely, and if we are able to do as many as our ambition allows us, we will make that saving. If we don't, as I said, then we need to look and readjust. But that's our aim. It's ambitious, but it's. I think we need to be ambitious, especially against this backdrop. And that's where we're aiming for. But we can keep reviewing it.
Thank you very much, Janine. I've got an indication from Councillor John Spanswick who wanted to come in on a supplementary.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that, for Canna. We don't have accurate figures. Janine refers to perhaps 10 sites. I'm sure each site is not costing 30,000, but we don't really know. Apparently, we haven't got the accurate figures, so it's not achievable, not realistic in year one. And I'm frightened by the comment then that said, well, if we can't achieve it through that, we'll have to make cuts elsewhere, maybe reducing grass cutting. It's already been reduced to its minimum, so that means there's areas then not going to be cut. So this is a frontline service. As I thought we were protecting frontline services. It's not good news. This proposal 300 is not achievable this year and should be removed.
Do you wish to respond, Janine?
Yes, I will, Chair.
Thank you.
With regard to the comment on grass cut, Councillor Spanswick, that is about grass cutting within play areas, not grass cutting more wholly across the borough, because we already have that specified. We've done numerous reductions over the years, and we're down to a minimum level now across the borough, as you're aware. Where we are, we set that target of the savings target of 300,000. We think it's achievable, or we wouldn't have included it in the budget. What we need to do now is work with the clubs and move through the year to ensure that we get there. What we need to do, and it's advisable and prudent, is to keep reviewing that target to ensure that we can achieve it. And when we get to a 6, 7 or month 8, we'll be in a much better position. But we are confident at this stage. It's ambitious, but we're confident that we can move towards achieving that. And that's why the figure was put in. So we will only know as we move along the process, but we would like to see to achieve that. So if we did not see that saving from the CAT transfer, it would then have to come from other areas of the directorate, and all cuts currently are incredibly difficult for all service reductions. So what we'll do is work hard to achieve this saving as put forward and monitor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Janine. And according to my notes, everybody that indicated they wanted to speak has already spoken. So I don't think there's any further questions for all the invitees. Can I just thank you all very much for your attendance. I realise it was short notice and it's very much appreciated. I'll take this opportunity now for a 5-minute comfort break for the scrutiny committees and reconvene to discuss the recommendations at the moment it's 12:20 according to my laptop. 12:25.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to move and ask Meryl to remind us, based from last Wednesday and Thursday as well, what the prominent features were and what potential recommendations we would like to actually put forward to COSC next Monday.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to go back. Obviously, there's been a lot of questions and answers on all of the different budget proposals, but there haven't been that many actual recommendations talked about. So I was going to start by going through the recommendations that have been mentioned, although you'll appreciate the wording hasn't been fine-tuned. So if I just start by going through, I think the first recommendation that we had was that a member spoke about the burden of additional legislation without funding, and that there was a recommendation that the authority lobbies Welsh Government to ensure that additional legislation comes with consequential funding to avoid putting the local authority under additional unnecessary financial pressure from existing budgets.
Meryl, can I just stop you 1 second? Councillor Mike Clark has indicated he has no sound. I really don't know what to... He has no sound. Could it be a localised issue with internet, broadband?
Well, I'm on here and my sound's okay.
Right.
So we're in the same house, so I don't know how that's happening.
Perhaps you could share a laptop.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, if I could just interrupt, I actually lost all server functionality. I've just dropped out of the call minutes while I've had to try and attempt to rejoin. Yeah. So there obviously something is technical going on.
There are problems, Jane. I lost my entire internet last Friday morning. When I got up at 7 o'clock, nothing, and I went out BT here, and it was 12:30 before I was restored to internet. Thank you. Sorry, Meryl. I think we can move on because nobody else is in it. I was just worried it was a major thing that others would be experiencing as well. Thank you.
I think, as Councillor Shaw has just said, it's maybe worth either restarting his laptop or rejoining the appointment, maybe.
Yeah. Right, that's worked for me. Yeah.
So I've read out a potential recommendation then about what do the committee feel about that? That was a proposed recommendation. Is that something they wish to?
This would be under the chief execs?
This was the general point, wasn't it? That the
Council-wide.
Lobby Welsh Government to ensure additional legislation comes with consequential funding to avoid putting the local authority under additional unnecessary financial pressure.
Now, which councillor actually put that forward?
Councillor Alex Williams.
Right, Alex, did you want to sound out about a potential recommendation on this? No. Right, well, I'm just going to ask Councillor John Paul Blundell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just to say, really, on this one, I don't know what much else we can do other than ask the leader and the chief exec and the cabinet to make those comments to Welsh Government. There's not much else we can do, really, other than write a letter to them and ask for a response.
But it is, it is a recommendation from us. Jane, did you want to comment on this one?
Yes, please, Chair. Right, I'm going to sound really controversial, I suppose. Here.
No.
Not that anybody would expect anything less of me.
Love it, Jane, go for it.
Right, I've just come out of a meeting from Welsh Government. In that meeting, Julie James informed me to my face that we are on a flat budget. We do not have any cuts to our budget. So if that is the case, why is it that we keep being told we have to make cuts and make savings? If we've got a flat cash budget, that means, okay, it's not a growth budget, but that does mean that we shouldn't be going backwards. So I want to know why we are going backwards. So I think that's my question, is I want Cabinet to explain to us why we are going back when we have a flat cash budget settlement with COVID consequentials that are subsequently built in. Because I'm really confused. Officers keep telling us that we have to make cuts and savings and all this sort of thing, when I know in all reality we're having a flat budget.
Are you actually saying then at that point that you would like to recommend that Cabinet explores the situation when the Minister is saying no cuts are required?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sure that as Jane has had first-hand experience of talking to the Minister, we could put this to Cabinet. As Meryl, would that be in order for us to say that? Because you can't have a Minister saying one thing and
can we just have the word in then, Chair? I think you just started to reword it.
Well, yeah. Well, what I suggested to Jane was we ask Cabinet, why are we experiencing having to make cuts whilst the Government Minister is insistent that it is a flat budget which requires no cuts and no redundancies? Is that everybody happy with that? Yeah, I've got people saying they support it. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, I think we've achieved one recommendation, and it's going to be interesting to see.
Sorry. So the first one, was anybody supporting the one about the authority lobbies Welsh Government? Yes.
Well, I did give Alex an opportunity. He doesn't appear to have come back in. I don't know if he's experiencing problems, but he was the one who actually flagged that up.
I've got him as present on the...
Alex, do you wish to move a recommendation? Yes.
If I can come in. I am aware that as a previous scrutiny, we have written to Welsh Government, I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
I think that we should be writing to Welsh Government, but actually part of the discussion needs to be we need to be more public in what we're saying. So it's not just about writing to Welsh Government, it's about giving a good explanation to the general public as to why we feel we are in this situation. Because the general public don't understand that it costs £5,000 to send a child to school for a year, as an example. So I think we need to be really clear about what, you know, it's like when we re-referred scrutiny back to today, part of that reason was because we didn't have the understanding or the explanations to go along with what was being put to us. And we had case studies that came back to us. The general public do not understand where we spend our money. And if Welsh Government are saying that we do not have to make cuts, and our cabinet and our officers are saying that we do, then somebody, somewhere, something's going amiss.
Well, in addition to putting this recommendation to cabinet, we can also discuss this at other meetings, because this is something that is with us all of the time, not just at budget time. You know, I don't know, Alex, are you back? No, he must be having a problem, because I mean it's 15 minutes ago that we.
Okay. I suppose we
move on, Meryl, and you know,
I suppose we know that Councillor Williams is proposing that. It's whether the committee wish to support it as a recommendation, and then we move on.
Does the committee wish to put that as a recommendation, or would you prefer to sort of revisit it at future scrutiny meetings? I'm in your hands.
There's a recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll officially move that as.
Okay, that's fine, John Paul. Yeah, that's been moved. Nobody's actually indicated they don't want it. So, as most people seem to be supportive, can I say, if you do not support, just type in quickly. Otherwise, we'll include that for the recommendations, as proposed by Councillor John Paul Blundell. And presumably we have a seconder. I've got.
Yes,
Chair.
Yeah. John, did you wish to speak on this?
Chair, I got a bit confused. I was speaking on the bit that James saying about with the no cuts to the budget, that budget.
Yes.
Just a comment that I'd like to make. The problem is we're protecting, or not making the cuts in education. And I know that the comment is made that it'll mean lose teachers' jobs, but that's not always the case in every school. So while we're protecting them, hence the cuts are happening elsewhere. So this budget is a bit topsy-turvy in some ways, because we've got growth there, which you can argue whether it's totally required. Hence why then we end up with which we are, right? I thought we were protecting frontline services, but we are in effect cutting some frontline services.
I think at this moment in time, what really jumps out at me on this is it really needs exploring by BREP, and the chair of BREP is here. Martin, would you agree with that this is something BREP could really look at in depth?
Thank you, Chair, and hello everyone. First of all, can I give my apologies? I couldn't make the pre-meet at 9 o'clock, but I've sat here and listened with a lot of interest at the debate that we've had this morning. I was going to come in later on actually to raise the concern and issue I have with BREP. I raised an eyebrow last week when BREP was being used as a means to justify scrutiny of the budget, when in fact we have to understand and accept that only 12 people are part of BREP, and there are 54 councillors in the chamber. And if officers seek to go down that road, then they are clearly disenfranchising 41 councillors, if you consider that the deputy leader also participates in BREP.
Yes.
So my suggestion for recommendation on BREP would be that we review the role and responsibility of BREP. We can't simply have a scrutiny process where BREP is being used as a tool to justify, when quite rightly other councillors are saying, well, I'm not part of BREP. I didn't have the opportunity and it's only now I'm getting the opportunity to make a representation. So I would present that as a recommendation because I think we need to look at BREP. And yes, once that role and responsibility has been discussed, and I think it should be discussed by members as well, then we could discuss what is the most relevant and appropriate work programme.
Yeah.
If, for example, we feel BREP should carry on, we may have a view that it shouldn't carry on. I'm fairly relaxed about it all. But before we start talking about a work programme for BREP, Chair, I think we need to look at the role and responsibility from here on in.
Yeah, I totally agree, Martin. I think I said as much last Thursday, because we do not get all of the information on the budget. We only get a certain amount. So, yeah, I'll go along with that. Alex is back in now. So
just to clarify on the role and on what Mark suggested, are we asking, is the recommendation that to Cabinet that the role and responsibility of BREP be reviewed?
Yeah, that is what Martin said.
Okay.
And I'm happy to go along with that.
Could we ask Cabinet and the Corporate Management Board to review and define what they think the role and responsibility of BREP is? And when we had a look at that, then we can discuss within the community scrutiny forum.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward, Mera. And nobody has disagreed. If we can just go back to Councillor Alex Williams. Now, John Paul has moved the point he made as a recommendation.
What point did I make, Chair?
Right.
Sorry, Councillor Williams. We started on the recommendations and I brought up your previous point that you'd asked for a recommendation to be made on that the authority lobbies Welsh Government to ensure that additional legislation comes with consequential funding to avoid putting the local authority under additional unnecessary financial pressure from existing budgets.
Yes, thanks to John Paul for moving that. I think that's absolutely crucial. I think I was referring to the Chief Executive's expenditure, wasn't I, on tackling homelessness at the time. I think there was a £2.1 million recurring expenditure. So I think it's absolutely crucial that any legislation from Welsh Government comes with a consequential funding. So yes, I believe that should be going forward as a recommendation, and I thank John Paul for moving it.
Right, we've got. Correct me if I'm wrong now, Mera, we have 3 recommendations to date.
Right. So just to recap, there was that one which Councillor Williams is back now, and that was proposed and seconded. And then we had Councillor Gabby request the Cabinet. This is about the local government minister speaking with Jane this morning and telling her that there was a flat cash budget and that no redundancies were needed. And I think, Chair, you reframed it that we request the Cabinet to explore this. And then we had Councillor Spalmsrick saying we're not making cuts in education, but cuts are happening elsewhere. So there's growth in some areas, but others we are cutting frontline services. And he said about the Chair of BREP to look at in depth, but then the Chair of BREP came in and we said that the recommendation was that CMB and Cabinet review and define what the role and responsibility of BREP is, and then it comes back to scrutiny to look at what their response.
Okay, everybody happy? Jane, you wish to speak on this?
And not so much this, but following on with another recommendation, I suppose.
Right.
And that would be that we've already been taught, right, this, I don't know quite how to word it. However, our staff come under NJC terms and conditions, which is a UK-led wide base for determining pay terms and conditions for all Green Book employees of local authorities. Health has already been informed, although there is some debate about that now at UK level with regards to the consequentials. But Health have already been told that they're going to get a 5% increase in pay, because that is a devolved issue under the agenda for change, and that means that Welsh Government can implement that pay sort of strategy for our own NHS workers, and quite rightly so. It's the same for our teachers. So Welsh Government have a devolved responsibility in regard to teachers' terms and conditions, but we don't have the same devolved responsibility for NJC Green Book. That being said, we've already been told by Westminster that all public services are going to have a pay freeze next year. The Welsh Government have already assured us that our health colleagues and our teachers won't be. So how is that going to be? And we will need to make recommendations as an authority that Welsh Government intervene and represent the views of the NJC committee. So that's all our staff. We've spoken today in scrutiny about the white paper for the care sector. If the white paper for the care sector comes into play, that means it's a real living wage. So that's above, you know, it's foundational living wage. That means that they need to be on the same terms and conditions as the NHS. If they don't do that, our local government workers are going to be devalued, disenfranchised, and put at the bottom of the pile again. So I think we need to be doing something around that funding. We need to be saying something about the terms and conditions of staff as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Jane. Alex, you wanted to speak on this?
Yeah, sorry, it probably didn't come through in time, but it was on the last point about BREP, to be honest. I know you all would have recognised what I said in previous meetings about BREP being in the public domain. I don't know whether anyone had the chance as well before I went on a different planet to mention to Jill about publishing the book, the budget book. Did anyone manage to do that?
We can put in a recommendation along those lines. I'm sure John would be delighted to.
Well, it's just that rather than a recommendation for future occasions, I think all of us should be in receipt of the budget book before we decide on the budget in February. So this is quite an urgent recommendation, I suppose. But on BREP, I'm firmly of the belief, and I've said this in the past, and I don't know why officers and the cabinet were reticent to do so. But I think BREP should be in the public domain, and I acknowledge what Martin said about some councillors being disenfranchised, because not all of us, including myself, have access to the papers which BREP has. And I fully believe that there should be, and I know corporate look at this in some detail, but I fully believe that we shouldn't be looking at the budget in these kinds of silos that we do at the moment, in terms of looking at the budget in education, social services and communities. You know, we are trying to demonstrate that we are one council, so we should be looking at it in the round, in a holistic way. And therefore, I fully believe that BREP should sort of morph itself into some kind of financial scrutiny committee, whereby all of these things are considered on a roll-in basis throughout the year, rather than just in these kinds of budget scrutiny meetings. Perhaps that's a matter which we need to consider at the AGM when we're considering the constitution. But I would support Martin's suggestion that we have the directors and the cabinet look at what they feel that BREP can do. But I would perhaps go a step further in asking for it to be in the public domain, and for it to become a financial scrutiny committee of council. So I'd put that forward as well to strengthen Martin's original point.
Right, Chair, shall I respond to that just for a moment?
Yes, please.
So the position is, as it stands, that constitutionally the BREP is a budget research and evaluation panel, which means that it isn't a committee of council, and it is held in private, and it's no requirements to publish it. And I think it's done on that basis because it's an early consideration of budget proposals, which budget information then, which may not come to pass. So I think there's a couple of things here. One is that by saying this recommendation, are we predetermining the outcome of the one that Councillor Jones has raised, which is we're asking CCMB to come back to us with a review of the role and responsibility of BREP, and then for scrutiny to look at their response and how we take that forward. So I don't think the two are at cross purposes. If we're saying, well, it should be a financial committee and it's got to be different constitution and it's got to be added in the annual meeting, that's actually sort of predetermining, if not constraining, what we're asking them to do in the first recommendation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think really the proposal by Martins that it was reviewed should do just that, because if you put it into the public domain, you will invariably lose a lot of information, not gain it. It's a matter of whether or not it could be shared
at that point in time.
Yes, this is it. So I'm happy for us to stick with Martin's recommendation, but there will be plenty of opportunity then, Alex, for you to contribute to how you would like BREP reviewed, as well as all the other councillors, because that's what we need, is an opportunity to review it.
Yeah, Chair, I'm happy with that suggestion, to be honest with you. And then I'll put my view forward. And I acknowledge the fact that perhaps putting early information into the public domain might lose some of the key information which we need. But I still do think that all 54 of us should be able to receive that information and play a full role in the process.
Yes. Okay, that's noted, Alex. I think we should return back to Jane's.
Sorry, Chair. With Councillor Gabby's, I've got down what she said, but I think we need to firm up what are we actually recommending. How would she word that then?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if I've understood it correctly, it is a concern that all our staff and people who we contract out work to, everybody should be receiving the recommended living wage.
I think there's that
if I'm
element,
wrong, Jane.
but it's also the element
it's not.
that if we are protected, if Welsh Government are going to be funding the NHS and the teachers, and there's going to be a pay freeze, how are we? What about the NGC staff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about the Green Book employees. Yes.
So how do you? What do you want to say to Cabinet? How do you want
when they write their letter to Welsh Government, I would like them to impress that they need to lobby Westminster essentially for the value of public services. You know, of all public services. It's not just about Green Book employees.
Yeah.
So do you want us to mention in there the pay freeze and the 5% increase for one and the teachers
and the devolved status of the NHS and teachers, please? There's only Green Book employees that aren't devolved now.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Okay.
Yes, I think so.
Right.
In the earlier meeting, Councillor Shaw made a point about the narrative of ESF5 saying it should include Gypsy, Roma and Travellers, because that wasn't the case. I don't know if you want to, if that needs to be a recommendation or if that would just be taken forward.
Yeah, EFS5. Oh, I've got that as being a Central South Consortium.
It was probably the ES5 for budget pressures, was it?
Yeah.
Rather than, just one moment.
I'm not sure. I've got so many pieces of paper here now that I've lost the will to live.
No, hang on, that's not ES5.
Chair.
Yes, Rod?
I did raise that point, and it is important, I think, that we get this this title correct, but it was corrected in subsequent words and letters as well. So I think someone just said it's ESF4.
ESF4,
yeah. But I think it was acknowledged that.
Oh, yes, I can see it now. Yeah, I've got it now, Rod.
So we don't need to make a recommendation then, Councillor Shaw?
I think they've corrected the error now, so it is, yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to make them just for the sake of it.
Just wanted to raise it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Councillor Walters made a point about the staff leave in education, but rather could we not have a long-term strategic vision developed using the expertise of staff available, beforehand? I think the director agreed with that and picked it up, but I don't know if that was if that was going to be translated into a recommendation, or are we happy just to move on?
Well, we'd like to see it in place then, wouldn't we, basically?
What do members want?
Chair, can I speak on that, please?
Yeah.
Yes, certainly, John.
Yeah, I think I know in government meetings I've been doing in the past, it doesn't appear to be like a central register. If there are particular posts under threat, it doesn't appear to be a central register to say, well, okay, well, this school next month there may be a vacancy. So I think there's scope for BCBC to set up some.
I think this one was
process to look at vacancies and threat, redundancy problem.
I don't think this one was schools related. I think it was central education, was it? I'm just looking for the actual.
Yeah, Meryl, it was central education. I think it was to do with loss of sort of knowledge management while people leave.
Do you know which EFS it was? Sorry, Tracy.
Bear with me a second.
I can't actually see it. And I've got all my scribbles here from.
Sorry, Meryl, I'm just trying to go through several documents, so
I know, I've got several.
I'll come back to you now as soon as I know.
Can we just move to Reverend Edward Evans, because he did raise in the scrutiny meeting EFS 7 and concerns for the reduction in EdSykes. Reverend Evans, did you want to speak on that?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. Just to make the point, first of all, in Thursday's meeting, I made a point about the consortia. Councillor Charles Smith answered that to more than my satisfaction, so I don't need to refer to that. But I do want to refer to EFS 7, which is a reduction in the education psychology service. I would strongly want to oppose that, not just under normal circumstances, because it's a very important service which schools have great difficulty accessing because there are very few EdSykes. But given the current pandemic and the stories that we hear of the effect it's having on our young people, I would have thought that rather than reduce the EdSyke, we need to increase the number of EdSykes that are available.
Yeah.
So I would recommend, or like to put forward a recommendation, that that line be deleted from the budget, or rather than a reduction, an increase, if that were possible. I don't know about.
Yeah, that could be put as a recommendation, because I know in the governing body meetings I've been in, that is concerned about mental health with children with this pandemic, and yes, reduction. I prefer to see 1%, 0.1% more on the council tax personally. But
yes, we've had a major problem for a very long time with the EdSyke service in Bridgend, with people being on the sick, people on maternity leave. To reduce it even further would be a complete and utter disaster.
Yeah.
As far as the education psychology is concerned.
Yeah, but yeah, I have to agree there, and I think Councillor Clark would like to speak, and I've got Councillor Amanda Williams who wishes to speak, and Councillor Beadle is supporting Canon Evans. So, okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Nora Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I would totally support what Canon Evans has mentioned. I would see it, especially after the problems that we have at the moment, that it's an essential service, the psychology service, especially for our younger members in society. So I totally agree with what has been said.
And Councillor Amanda Williams.
Hi, yes, apologies first of all, I was late to the meeting. I've had numerous issues this morning with IT.
Yeah,
I wanted to stretch it a little bit further with my concerns, not just the psychological issues, which are going to be extreme at the moment, but also looking at the additional learning needs. I'm sure that that's going to have an impact as well. And with the new reform, there's no financial support out there at all for schools, and I know the schools are struggling, and I think that's only going to get worse as well. Thanks.
Yes. Councillor Rodshaw.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say.
Yes, come in, Meryl, by all means.
We haven't got a clear proposal because we've got Reverend Evans spoke about the Ed Psych service and said the budget saving be removed or increased. So we need, as a committee, to agree what we're asking, and also the Section 151 officer would ask us where we're going to compensate for those.
I think I actually said I'd be happy for 0.1% to go on the, because they're not proposing anything for this year. No reduction for this year, it is for next year, I believe.
Right, okay. Yeah.
But that, for next year, I would be quite happy to propose that we increase by 0.1%. But what I'm trying to do, Meryl, is to Councillor Rodshaw wishes to speak in it. This is I know it doesn't seem much on the budget, but from where I'm standing and from the advice I'm getting, we do need to increase this budget, and it might well lead to that would be something that in next year we would be pursuing. Yeah, Councillor Rodshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I spoke at length about EFS 6 and 7 and SCH1 this morning, and I made my feelings quite clear about cutting £100,000 out of the central services is, well, frankly, foolhardy, I think, because all schools benefit from it. And there were ways to achieve that because it's 1/10 of the 1% efficiency savings that are put in there for the same year. You made a very valid point as well, Chair, though. There are proposals that will be there for next year. They're not included in this year's budget.
Yes, that is the case on this particular one. They're not proposing to cut it this year, but I think we need to probably make a recommendation to say that we would not support that in future years. And next year we would provide an alternative source of the funding.
Agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tom Beadle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know that I've indicated I support Canon Evans, but I'd like to point out to members the fact that this service is overstressed at the moment, and it's extremely difficult to get a psychological assessment from this department. And in fact, one of the issues I've got is the fact that the schools are actually commissioning independent psychological assessment because they can't access our service. And just moving forward, given the fact that we're going to be experiencing cuts in the future within the education service, it's going to make that not affordable for schools to commission the service. I mean, currently under the budget, we're able to access and commission an independent assessment because we cannot access our own education psychology department.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tom. I think, Meryl, at this point it's quite clear that members are very, very concerned about any future threat to this, and indeed think that it should be increased. So I think we will say we would never support the committees will not support any proposals for the future for cuts to this, and indeed would suggest that it is strengthened, and if necessary it is funded by a 0.1% increase in council tax. Is everybody happy with that?
I'm clear on that one, Chair, which is EFS 7, but the ALN support was another separate point, wasn't it? So I just want to pick that up. I don't think that was part of EFS 7, was it? We just that Councillor Williams spoke about. I'm just going back to the education one, sorry, to look at that now.
ALN is another budget pressure that's, as Alex Williams has said previously, that you know, if these measures to be handed down by Welsh Government, perhaps they should be supported with the money to be able to provide them. It isn't referred to in his EFS 6 or 7, I don't think.
Right, okay.
No, I just raised that, if I can come in, because the impact is going to be greater, because you'll have all of those, not just those who were struggling before, but all those now, because there will be more children coming in with additional learning needs, having not been to school for the best part of, well, 12 months. It might be even longer. So you're going to have an additional number of children who will need support through there, and psychologically, a lot of those will need some more support because they haven't had this additional learning that they need.
I understand now. I can factor that into the final draft. That's great.
The chair, I've lost her contact.
I think, yeah, Cheryl's gone, so perhaps
Yeah, Cheryl got kicked out.
John Paul might have to take over, or someone. Anyway.
I think she'll rejoin now shortly.
There we are. You have me worried then?
It's just one of those blips. It just went off on its own. Right.
Right. So we've understood that now, Chair. That's part of the same reason.
Thank you, Chair, for that. Perhaps added to that recommendation is that we ask whoever is responsible for this to increase the EdPsych service this year. The proposal is for future years, but given the circumstances that they seek to increase the EdPsych service this year. I don't know how others feel about that.
Yeah, well, that's why I suggested the 0.1% on the council tax, which would have very little effect on people.
That for this year, though, or was that? I thought that was for next year.
Well, I'm happy to do it for this year because we've got this pandemic, and children are really struggling now. You know, that's the information I get, and I think a lot of my colleagues are getting it as well, that it really needs strengthening, not being put under threat. You know, obviously I'm a Democrat, I will go with the majority, but my feeling is we should be increasing it.
We've had problems with the EdPsych service for very, very many years. Yes, I know it. The demand on the EdPsych service is going to increase exponentially in the coming months. And I would suggest that we need an increase now, today, rather than wait for next year.
Yeah. Right.
Is that supported by?
I've got Lindsay Morris wishes to speak.
Yeah, I just want to agree with that as well. I mean, I'm a secondary teacher and a governor in a secondary school, and I've got a child that's got ALN. And it urgently needs funding. Well, all ALN needs funding now, but in particular the EdPsych as well, because you've got children that are 6 months per year behind waiting before they're on any sort of pathway or waiting for any sort of diagnosis, which if you've got a child in year 11 now, by the time they get year 9, by the time they get to have a diagnosis and any sort of strategies put in place to help them, they're 16, they're year 11, they're looking at leaving school, which means then that they're not getting any sort of support, which means we have failed these children right the way through their education. So we really can't afford any cuts next year, and if any funding can be put in place this year, that really needs to be a priority.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. I mean, we can only make recommendations. We haven't got the power to actually insist. But, you know, I would say that it probably will be supported by the majority of members, because I think all of us that are governors, and most members are governors, are being made aware of the dreadful cost of the pandemic on the well-being and mental health of our young people.
Thank you.
We've got some comments in the text boxes about supporting the an increase for 21-22 as well.
I don't think we've had any anti-comments at all.
Okay.
So members are either in favour or they are pretty anodyne about it.
Just a quick question, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
And that is, I might have missed it, but I would be supportive of the suggestion so far. But the immediate response from the finance department and others is, where are we going to find the money? So did I miss that?
Well, I proposed that a 0.1% increase on council tax would fund an increase.
So
it would actually produce approximately £75,000.
Yeah, so that's where I sort of have issue in that, and it goes back to my comment on Welsh Government fully funding these kinds of things, ALN or anything else, is that, it's always the taxpayer, isn't it, that has to sort of bear the burden of legislative changes which have been brought about by Welsh Government. So, I think we need to be careful about putting the burden on the taxpayer during these very difficult times during the pandemic. I mean, a lot of families are struggling financially, and I don't think people would look very kindly on us increasing council tax. I think we do need, first of all, going back to an earlier recommendation, in putting pressure on the Welsh Government to fully fund these kinds of things first, before we consider any increase in council tax. But yes, I support the premise of increasing, education psychology for this particular year. But perhaps we need to look at the budget book, as I said earlier on, to try and find an area where we can make a I was going to say saving, but Councillor Gabby would criticise me for that. I'll say cut instead of education psychology, because people won't accept any further council tax increase.
I think basically it was going to be 4.5%, and that was then reduced to 3.9. This was merely be putting it to 4%, which is still 0.5% less than what was originally proposed, and I think we are now at the point of collapse in the EdSpsych service, and I am desperately worried that children will have real problems and no help if they don't bolster it. So I thank you for your support, Alex. I think basically we're all in agreement that this is something that cannot wait a year. It needs doing now, and all we have the power to do is to make the recommendation. If it's not taken up, I'd be perfectly prepared to move in full council that we do it. But I'll bring in now Reverend Evans wishes to come back in, and then Meryl wishes to speak, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I fully understand what Councillor Eichhorst is saying about the need for Welsh Government to pay for this work, but I consider it to be so urgent that unfortunately local taxpayers should be responsible for the cost. We can't wait for Welsh Government to sort themselves out and to say, yeah, we pick up the tab. This needs to be done now, and if that means a slight increase in council tax, then I, as a taxpayer, would be, I can't say happy to do it, because as I say, it's Welsh Government's responsibility, but would be prepared to do it to ensure this service is fully funded. Thank you, Chair.
So, thank you, Reverend Evans. I think basically what this all stems from the historic spend on education in Glamorgan. We inherited a low budget for education. I think you'll find most other councils in Wales actually have much more per child than we get. So that is why I'm saying.
Yes, that's perfectly true. We are very, very low in the table of funding for pupils, both at secondary and primary level.
Yes. I think, Meryl, are you quite clear?
I think I'm clear on this, Chair. If you're happy, after we break from the meeting, Tracy and I will just check our notes and firm up what's been said, and I'll send them to you to go through with me before we go any further. Okay.
Yeah. If you could send them to the chairs of the other two committees as well.
But if you could be on the
I'm very
lookout,
conscious this isn't my committee.
if they could be on the lookout for them this afternoon and respond, because obviously time is of the essence.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Amanda, did you wish to add anything to this?
I just wanted to agree with Alex, because I do have concerns as well. I mean, I personally would be happy to increase. I'd be more than happy to pay myself, but I know the families are struggling, and I know already the information has gone out with even though it's less than we originally thought, the increases that will be going ahead next year. I've had families in tears wondering how they're going to afford the increase as it is. So many people, you walk through my village, the number of houses that have gone up for sale that have just not long been moved into and done up, and you talk to the residents and they say, we have to sell, we've lost our jobs. And I think we're in tough decisions, and to sometimes just say, it's a very difficult one. We need to increase this, but also people can't afford their council tax. People can't afford to buy food. It's such an awkward time at the moment. So, you know, I think to just simply say, whilst most of us will say, yes, we're happy to increase our council taxes, we're not in the same situation as most of these families, and I really do feel for them.
Yeah, I think basically, you know, I am referring not 1%, it's 0.1%, and over an average bandy house, I don't think that would come to more than £1.50 a year. So, you know, I'm not looking at imposing awful. It's just that when it's all concentrated into one bit, there is nowhere else at this moment in time that I can honestly say that I would want to propose. But I mean, if Cabinet would like to do it another way, when they get our proposals, then I would certainly be open to suggestions. But if they're not prepared to move anything from anywhere else, at the final resort, that's the only way we're going to get that money to help these children.
Can we word it, Chair, that along the lines of like reluctantly propose that if there's no other way of getting it there?
Yeah, that's fine. And also if Cabinet would care to make any other proposals, then we would be fine. We just want to actually address what we see as a crisis.
The thing is, Chair, if I may, I'll harp on about this again. Without seeing the budget book, we just cannot come up with any alternatives, can we? So we're left with a situation where we have to raise council tax or put a suggestion of raising council tax, however little it may be, rather than being able to actually delve deep into the line-by-line budget and find a potential saving which could be diverted and allocated to this particular budget heading.
Well, so, I hear what you're saying, Alex, and I really don't want to beleaguer this any longer. The amount I have suggested is £75,000. If people would say 50,000, that would be even less than 0.1%, which would be probably less than £1 a year. So, I mean, basically, I'm just saying that's the only thing, because if Jill says if we don't come up with somewhere to get it from, it stays in, we are giving them the alternative, well, put it up to 4%, or, you know, 39.5% or whatever. You know, it would mean they could take on another body that would help to reduce the huge waiting list there is for the Ed Psych service. And if anybody disagrees, please say.
Can I speak, please?
Yes, certainly, Rod.
Yeah, okay. The whole issue of EFS 6 and 7 came up because they are issues for next year's budget. There was no plans to make further cuts this year. I agree with both Councillor Williams's comments that this is probably not the right time to look to increase the budget on any line. So the recommendation in there at the moment is no increase but no reduction on an EFS 6 and 7, but to consider a reduction next year. Well, I would hope by next year we have a more robust way of looking at the whole process, frankly, and we can consider these cuts and how we turn them into a positive. We all got issues we're all very, very passionate about, but to say that, you know, we expect everyone to have a bigger increase on council tax than we would normally expect for this one area that needs attention, I think is going to be contentious. We all know that disability grants for children is 2 years. You know, there's whole areas of the council we need to improve, but by looking to increase one at the cost of others for this year's budget, I think is just wrong, frankly.
Fine, Councillor Shaw, you are perfectly entitled to that view. You see, what I'm looking at is to restore cuts that have already been made. You know, they've already suffered cuts to their budget, and as a result, the service is now in crisis. But as I've said, I'm a Democrat. If it's thought no, you don't want to increase it, but I am concerned that it is in crisis at the moment. Right, nobody else. Councillor Amanda Williams is typing. Do you want to speak, Amanda?
I'll speak instead then.
Yes,
I was just typing that I'm also concerned, but I'm with Rod here and Alex that I couldn't look some of these families in the eye, even for £1.50. You know, I've delivered food parcels myself to families who have been desperate, and that I just couldn't. And there are other people who don't have children either. I have 3 children. I'm lucky that they've got the support, and there's, you know, it's a difficult one, and I couldn't not this year because there's so many people in hardship. I just couldn't this year. Thanks.
No, that's fine.
Right. But I think we need to be clear, Chair.
Yeah.
Some people have spoken about it's next year's saving. Yeah. Some have said we should bring forward extra resource this year and pay for it from the council tax, and some are saying no action. So we need to have a committee way forward, whether we're making a recommendation or not.
It's unfortunate, Meryl, but we don't have buttons to press here, do we? So in order to take a vote.
We need to say which the proposal is for the recommendation, and get people to type in the text box yes or no.
That's the only way forward. Okay,
Chair, can we come up with some kind of compromise? And I'm not sure whether Jill and team will like this very much, but do we have to be that prescriptive over the alternative which we're prescribing here, or can we just say that the committee is reticent to accept this particular budget reduction proposal, and we would like the administration and the corporate directors to go back to the drawing board and find an alternative for us to consider at full council stage? Because we here, the 54 of us, can't come to a conclusion here of how we actually protect this budget, but we are unanimous in actually
we all want to protect it. Okay.
So surely the recommendation must be from scrutiny that we would like to protect this budget heading. However, we would like the executive and officers to come back with an alternative proposal rather than us prescribing a proposal.
That's fair comment, Alex. If we're not going to be able to agree on this, I'm
still not sure if you're talking about, like, the proposal at the moment as it stands is to make the savings next year, but if you want to make an increase this year, that's something else.
Can we just make a recommendation, Meryl, that these committees, because it's not committee, are very concerned about the education psychology, what we perceive to be in crisis and under undue pressure. We would like to recommend an increase to their budget and say nothing else. You all agree on that?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
In 21-22.
Yes. Yeah. We would like to see an increase in the budget to alleviate the huge pressure that they're operating under. Okay. I mean, if we're pushed to say from where, we say, well, you know, if we'd had more information, we probably would be able to give you something.
Everybody agreeing with that then?
I think everybody supports an increase. We just cannot agree on it coming from the council tax.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I think to find 50,000 is not beyond, as far as I'm concerned, they can take it out of reserves. Whatever.
Sorry, can I just clarify my own peace of mind? Are we talking about this for the coming financial year or subsequent years?
No, to increase the budget as of April.
As of April.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. That's,
and as far as I'm concerned, it is probably it needn't be a permanent thing, but that because of the pandemic, it is in crisis. And I don't care if they've got all those millions in years, they can take it from that.
With respect to, I think it should be a permanent increase because.
Well, it probably will need to be, Reverend. I'm not for 1 minute saying, but I'm quite willing to revisit this and see what improvements have been made and what pressures are on there. But the most important thing for me is to try and get something in there now, because I know there are children that are under tremendous strain.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think we're all agreed now. We don't go to the suggestion of increasing the council tax, but we say we want this budget increased to cope with the pressures.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
On we go then.
So school SEH1, there's quite a lot of debate about that from different positions. Some that we could bring the cuts forward and this year or part of them, and then others that they and they could actually remove other savings, and then some were that we should actually not cut schools. So just to discuss that really and get a view going forward if you want to make a recommendation.
Okay. John, did you want to speak on this?
Yes, please, Chair.
Yeah.
I was going to say the other one, but I accept where we're going with the other one. It's
yeah.
I'm conflicted myself in one breath. I'm saying we should be introducing this cut SCH1.
Maybe compromise, John. So.
But I bet that there's need. I still believe there's a need, even if it's I said 0.5, it could be a 0.25 or a 0.2% cut. Schools need to start, and I don't buy the story. I mean, if there's threats to jobs, we're talking a big cut to schools. A 0.25% is not going to equate perhaps to a teacher's salary or a learning support assistant. I'm not saying that should happen, but schools need to start being part of the bigger pain, having to make some cuts. They're not officially savings, they're cuts. And somewhere, if they can save a couple of thousand in each school's budget, that could contribute. It should be in this year's, there should be some cut in this year's MTFS. I might be in the minority here, but that's what I'm proposing. There should be consideration of a small 0.something% cut.
The problem is, Chair, is that how do we reconcile that? And I understand John's point, but how do we reconcile that with the fact that the vast majority of schools are in the red already?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's just a difficult one, isn't it? Really, when you've got schools such as my own in Pencoed Comprehensive, who are running something like a 600 grand deficit per annum. You know, where are the cuts
exactly where
to be made? You know,
from?
Where's it going to come from?
Yes. I've got to be honest. I couldn't support taking anything off schools, given the Bridgend schools' position in relation to the rest of Wales, and we won't even go to England because they are, you know, I mean that would be like being in God's pocket. I'm in England's settlement for education, so I personally couldn't. But is there anybody that would support John's proposal, recommendation that we do cut school budgets? How many schools? I think it's the majority, John.
Chair, I was happy to speak on this.
Yes, carry on. Well,
yeah, I don't see the value or the virtue of having an efficiency saving put into this year's budget for schools. I think, like we've just recognised, there's so many places that are under pressure. My particular penchant would be to support central services because all schools benefit from that. I absolutely agree. Lots of schools, not all schools, lots of schools are in deficit, but a lot of that is down to demographics as well as anything else. And you know, we've got to grasp this at some stage. The council over the last 10 years have had £68 million worth of cuts inflicted on it, and that equates to roughly 2,000 jobs. So it's not as if schools are a particular special case to be preserved at the cost of everything else. I think this is a huge debate, but trying to solve it now for a budget line for next year just isn't the place for that debate.
I think that's right, Rod, because we are, you know, what we're not prepared to do by the sound of it is to cut schools this year, because they've already had the indication that no cuts will be required. It will cause chaos to do it this year. But I agree, you know, it is an ongoing debate. I don't sit on that particular committee, but I don't know whether Councillor Gifford would have anything he wishes to add here, but I think it is more a debate for the next budget, and they may well be cut anyway next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Amanda?
I agree with both of you what you're saying there. I know I'm governor of Coity Primary and we're almost 200,000 in the red, having just agreed a 5-year plan. Now that is simply to do with the way they formulate, the formulas are for new schools when they move, and that was inherited by the new school opening, because obviously you expand a school, they don't, until those classes are up to full capacity, you're losing money as a school. And so when you double the size of a school, well, it's over double the size, that's where it stems from. There's a lot of new schools, and I think the problem is going to be not just, I think we need to look at education, but not in here today, because we need to be looking at how we're funding schools and the formulas that are being applied. Otherwise, we're never going to get schools out of deficits.
I agree, Amanda. I think it is an important point for debate, and I think the relevant scrutiny committee really needs to dig down deep and see, and to have comparators to see how Bridgend schools are funded compared to others.
Chair, does Councillor Gifford have a comment as chair of that scrutiny?
I did invite him to comment.
I don't think he's in the meeting any longer. He did say that he had to leave, didn't he, Claire?
Right, yes, I think he did, yes. Okay, over to you then, Meryl. Let's move us along. I think we're all in agreement there. It's
are we saying
for next year?
Yeah, nothing for recommendation this year on that point then? No. On our SEH1?
No.
Meryl, sorry, just in relation to the previous one with Councillor Walters, it was ESF8, which was staffing, yes. Okay.
Yes, let's go back to that one. So that was the one, sorry, before we talked about the Ed Psych service, there was a comment that Councillor Waters had made. Let's see where it is now.
Is that EFS8?
Yes.
Yeah, that's next year as well. There's no proposals for this year.
Can you remember the comment, Tracy? Sorry, I'm scanning up and down. Oh, here it is. This was about the long-term strategic vision being developed. So I don't know if you wanted to make a recommendation, although the saving is until next year. While they've still got those staff, they come up with a strategic vision for education rather than just cut in then. And well, it wasn't more so much cut in as not fill in vacant posts, wasn't it?
Yes, I think it was.
I think she felt that it wasn't the best way of structuring the service there.
Yeah, I think we'd need to see detail of that, wouldn't we?
Mm. So
before we could really comment.
Okay, so you don't want to make any recommendation on that one? As
there's no threat this year, I think it is one of the things that we flag up for that committee to look at to see what it would mean. Okay. I think it's important. It's definitely important, but you know, the scrutiny committee, one can actually delve into that and see exactly how they were going to propose to save £109,000 next year. Not this year, next year.
Okay.
Everybody's
so
happy?
Moving on then, I think the next thing, jumping about just a moment, the next thing we had was today we talked about COM1, wasn't there?
Yeah, that was the most talked about proposal of the year.
Sorry, just to go back, the CX5, where the 151 officer changed the narrative, I think nobody mentioned that today, so we're happy with that. Yeah? So,
it had addressed.
Yes, no comment.
Sort of, yeah, I mean, it posed a problem because it didn't read right, basically. Yeah. But, you know,
then I would say
no. I don't think we need to do anything about that. It was totally acceptable.
Right. So COM1 then is the one that's probably had the most talked about in all the meetings we've had.
Absolutely.
The CAT transfers, etc., and the different implications, and the 300,000 target. Do we want to make any recommendations on that? Do we want to discuss that?
Well, I would defer to Councillor John Paul Blundell on this for any suggestions as his chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. What I've written down for COM1 is obviously there's not a desire for this cut to be in there, but the same problem we have with the psych service is the same one with this. Where do we get the excess money from? Now, we can't. There's no real appetite for raising council tax at this present moment in time, from what I've listened to in the debate. I could be wrong, and please, members, correct me if I'm right on that. But I think the recommendation should be COM1 is either removed, or the scrutiny committee is giving regular updates on it, so we can track its progress, not just officers and the cabinet member, because I feel that's the best way forward on that. Now, I'm sure John, I can see John Spadley saying speak, so I think that's all I want to say on the matter.
Thank you. Yes, John, fire away.
I'll try to keep it brief, Chair, and I agree with what John Paul said. There's two sides to this. Ideally, that cut shouldn't be there any further. There's been enough cuts to the service over the last 10 years to the point it's now not resilient, and we spend money on consultants to pick up on work that perhaps could have been done in-house. And this is back across the whole budget, where we never really, well, have the chance to look at the long-term and assess the long-term impacts of cuts. It's happened over the years with youth services. That's been cut, increasing crime and antisocial behaviour, never taken account of at the beginning, and we are where we are today. There's two sides. Ideally, I would say this cut should be removed, and I'm still support the CAT process going forward where appropriate and where there's a business case and where it will work. But then the savings, wherever those savings are, because the department doesn't know what the savings are at the moment because they haven't got the cost per site, apparently, even though I'm sure they've showed me them in the past. Those savings could be reinvested into that service, whether it's planting trees, putting benches, or just maintaining our areas a little bit better so we got that public realm sort of nice feeling and the well-being factor. Yeah. But if it can't be accepted that the 300 cuts removed, maybe it should spread over the next 3 years, not this year, but £100,000 per year from next year, the year after. So it's in there, so that as CAT, because the CAT process has been very, very slow to date. I know that the policy has changed and there's a couple taking place. I'm still not sure whether 10 will take place this year, and there's a lot more than 10 to be done. So there's no way, as Amber, 300,000, is that going to be achieved this year? So it needs to be realistic, and I say removed. And if there has to be savings, cuts in future years, it should be spread over 3 years, falling from 2022-23. And also, Chair, they should ask for the narrative to be amended regards play areas, because we can't have narrative saying cutting play areas, or we shouldn't have narrative saying cut, and then a capital programme with £330 investment in play areas.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Right. I've got Amanda Williams wishes to speak on this one.
Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Spanswick there. I cannot see how they're going to do the 300,000. I spoke with 2 football clubs last week who are working with Coity Higher Community Council with their asset transfers, and they said the same as other clubs. They've all said yes to potentially doing this, just to simply to put a freeze on the costs going up, because if they hadn't, the costs would have gone up. They've all been told, they've been forced with their backs against the walls. They don't think they could do it financially. They couldn't take anything over without putting all their costs up, because these are small clubs. They don't have the know-how. They are volunteers. So there's significant concerns there. But I also know that looking at Coity Higher, they've expressed an interest a long time ago at asset transfer into green spaces. However, they've not heard anything at all since. And because we have one officer dealing with it. So if there is a body who is serious about moving forward and can move forward as quickly as possible, when they haven't had anything, they don't know how much it costs to cut grass. They were told they don't have breakdowns for each site. They haven't got a clue how much they're spending. So, you know, when they haven't got this basic information, how can they move forward? And I cannot see how this can be done this year with one officer when we haven't even got the basic information.
Oh, thank you, Amanda, for that. That's very clear. Councillor Altaf Hussain, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to say really is that there should be no more cuts, because we don't know the funding local government has received so far, and when are we going to scrutinize that? So hang on what they have done. There's no more cuts. Let's get that, you know, what they have received so far and scrutinize that, and then we'll think about if we have to cut or we have to do something else. They're not telling us about that money they have received so far.
Right, thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Julia Williams, please.
Thank you, Cheryl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we were all in agreement on the topic before this about the psychological well-being of everyone, not just the young people. And so it brings us neatly, doesn't it, to the parks and open spaces. I mean, once this pandemic is over, we're all going to be flying into these places, aren't we, to get some fresh air and a sense of community, of togetherness. And what I would like certainly taken out is that those parks, pavilions, bowling greens, whatever, that have not got the appetite for this and are going to have to wait ages, because I agree with John that to 10 in a year is almost a joke, you know. Sometimes they've done 1 in a year, haven't they, if you look back. I'd certainly like the threat of if they don't have a CAT transfer, then they're going to have increased charges for the end users. And it's a threat. And like Amanda said, they're just agreeing to have a CAT transfer so that they don't have these charges imposed upon them. So I'd like to see that, or all of it taken out, really. Is nonsensical. You know, I just think that as I said earlier, I'm afraid I'm repeating myself, what is the point of a council? We're just palming everything off to other people. All we are is just a middleman for the money from Welsh Government. You know, it's just, well, I don't know, I can just go on and on, I'm afraid. I agree with John, this should be taken out completely.
Yeah, thank you for that, Julia. Tom Beale?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, this is just a statement because from personal experiences, because I am a Vice President of a rugby club, and this time last year, I asked Guy Smith about the CAT transfer for Maesteg Harlequins to South Parade Ground, and he assured me that it would be resolved by Easter. I have since referred back to him for an update, and I find that we're no further forward a year on when he actually promised to deliver the CAT for Easter last year. And, you know, that's just one clear example. I mean, my club is very anxious to take over this ground. They put in all sorts of provisions. In fact, last year they spent £40,000 of their own money improving the field and the drainage on the ground. And of course, we're looking forward to sort of getting hold of this lease because, like other clubs, we're not going to, we couldn't afford to face the increased charges that the council would levy upon us. But that leads me on to another thing. I mean, what is not inside the cat, and I speak this from an allotments point of view. A while ago, that my allotment became an association because it's so large, and subsequently that we registered as a charity on the understanding that the council would actually transfer the lease of the allotment onto us. And that hasn't happened. I've had to chase that up again this year, and I'm still no further forward. So I don't know what's happening within this team, but I have instructed my club committee to possibly email the director, because I can't get any satisfaction from the emails they already submitted for the club. But it's an ongoing issue, and I don't know how we can resolve this. But that figure that they have quoted, I honestly can't see how they could have targeted that figure without actually supporting evidence why they came up with that figure.
Thank you for that, Tom. I think we really need to wrap this one up now. John, you actually said, I think, that the cut should be at the very least spread over 3 years. Am I correct?
That's right, Chair. But the 3 years as from 22-23.
Yeah.
So it gives the future, the coming financial year, a chance for the cut process to work.
Well, that's your recommendation. I'm quite in favour of that, because I do think that the communities has been badly hit. I know they're going to say where we're going to get it from, but we'll cross that bridge. But it doesn't stop us making the recommendations. And if we want, we can look for where those savings can be made over the next year via the BREP process. Okay, are you happy with that, Meryl?
Chair, could we also make sure there's a recommendation for the play areas being removed, or suggest the wording regards play areas is amended?
Yeah, well, you can come in, and if I can get Meryl to speak. Oh God, don't say we've lost our officers.
Sorry, just my mic off. Sorry,
right.
I was speaking.
I was getting worried then, Meryl.
I was speaking, but you weren't actually hearing me. Sorry.
No.
I was just going to say that yes, we picked up the we need to take out the wording on the play areas, because there's capital programme investment in them, and to make it clear that we're talking about the savings. If they can't be removed, they should be moved forward from 22-23 onwards, split. Is it 100,000 over each year, or split 3 ways? Yeah,
that's what John recommended.
Yeah, I suggest that.
That's a suggestion. Yeah. Okay.
Is there anything else anybody has before we?
Councillor Martin Jones has indicated. Do you want to speak on this particular one, Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, how many times have we discussed CAT and the potential savings and the impact on communities?
So many.
The bottom line is, it's a mess.
It is.
Yes, it's an absolute mess. The strategic intent, the vision is there, but the tactical delivery, that is delivering CAT, is failing miserably. And I'll speak out perhaps in support of the one officer who has got the horrendous task to make this happen. He's on his own, he's trying his best, but he's not getting anywhere, is he?
No.
So rather than go round and round the mulberry bush about CAT, let's just stop it all and bring CAT into the scrutiny, request that the director and the cabinet member come to scrutiny, and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's be open, candid, and talk about it, and hold those two people to account for its actual delivery, because I fear we will be here this time next year yet again talking about why CAT is not being delivered. Tom Beadle has given a very good account of what is happening locally in his patch. I believe you could replicate that right across the borough.
Yeah,
absolutely right across the borough, because we are struggling to tactically deliver.
Yeah.
So let's bring this into the scrutiny sooner rather than later, so that when we do look at the proposed cuts, we're all in agreement that those cuts are achievable. but not at the expense, and I totally support what Councillor Julia Williams has said, not at the expense of reducing the facilities that are available.
No.
There are many ways we can deal with this, but you know, I am getting fed up with it because it needs to be gripped. It really does need to be gripped.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that, Martin. I think, you know, everybody's starting to sing from the same hymn sheet. Alex?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I know you want to move on, so I just want to say I couldn't agree with Martin anymore. But there is an appetite for some clubs to actually complete this CAT process. So actually, potentially, you might want to increase the budget of CAT to get some of these projects over the line, because you know we all praise Guy for all of the work he's doing, but he is a one-man band.
Well, this
so
is
you know this is the problem in some respects. You know, we just can't get some of these projects over the line. So I fully agree with what Martin is saying. Bring them in for scrutiny, but ultimately it's going to require more resource into this particular department in the short term to deliver the savings which the authority wants to actually deliver in the long term.
Yes, and from my perspective, they could do this from reserves and return the money to reserves when they actually achieve the savings that are attached to CAT transfer. I see nothing wrong with doing that as long as it's understood they have to be returned. You know, it's all about pump priming. You know, it's a invest to save.
Sorry, just to I'm not sure if members would be aware, but there is a community asset transfer assistant advertised on the vacancies at the moment. So they are recruiting a post there, it looks like. I just wanted to recap on the so at the beginning of the discussion on this item, the chair of SOC 3 proposed that we look at this in SOC 3. And that's sort of in keeping with what Councillor Jones has suggested now, that this is scrutinised. We also had a proposal from Councillor Spanzer that this year the target should be removed for the coming year, and or if it can't be removed, it should be spread over the 3 years, 100,000 a year. Starting from 22-23. So are we proposing all of those things? Yeah, just to be clear.
Well, I agree with them also, unless everybody's going to turn around and say no.
Okay.
You know, because I think where you were identifying savings, then you shouldn't be afraid to invest in to get that money back. And then once you've had the money back, it's going to be an ongoing saving. There we are. Okay, I think we'll move on from there. I think we're all happy with that. Meryl?
We've gone through the actual instances in the past 2 meetings and today's meeting where people have actually said they want to make a recommendation on something. But obviously there's been a lot of questions and answers, and members may have additional recommendations they wish to bring up, but they haven't brought them up before, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think we're all aware, those of us that are still here, we're all aware that...
fees and charges, Councillor Spanzer.
Yes, that was one. Yeah, that was definitely raised.
Chair, fees and charges, regards plus 1%, could we just make a recommendation that the policy on fees, the fees and charges policy, be reviewed with effect to, well, to be reviewed, because at the moment we're raising by inflation plus 1%. Yeah. We're not meant to make a profit on services, only meant to cover costs. So I would recommend that the fees and charge policy be reviewed with a view to removing the plus percentage.
To remove the +1, yeah. Okay.
I think that brings us to 6 recommendations in all.
One. Yes. There was another point that Councillor Voisey raised, which was about, it wasn't made into a recommendation, but it was about proposing that some sort of pest control service for those in receipt of benefits instead of cutting entirely. I don't know if anybody's got any views on whether they want to make a recommendation on that.
Chair, if I can, please.
I'm sorry, my mouse is so sensitive, I keep muting myself. Yes, carry on, John.
Yeah, I think as we were given the information, the fact regards the cabinet meeting last week, I've asked for it to be taken back to review the whole policy. So could I suggest we make a recommendation of that can be put on hold pending cabinet further review in the process?
Yes? Everybody in agreement with that? Anybody not? I think it's easier if you just say, if you're anti. No? Yeah. Fine then. You got that?
Yes, thank you.
Right. We are now going to go to page 36 and recommendations at 9. We have considered, at 9.1, we have considered the information contained in the report and the subsequent information. And Meryl, do you want to remind us now of the recommendations that these committees have all agreed to make?
I haven't got the final worded, Chair. We need to work on them, but
yeah,
I can see what they're regarding if you take me. So we've got the one where we ask the authority to lobby Welsh Government regarding additional legislation coming with consequential funding. The one where we ask CCMB to review and define what the role and responsibility of REP is and the response to come back to scrutiny to examine. And there was an addendum to that one about how the general public are explained to about the cost of service and how we spend our money. Then there was the one that Councillor Gabby brought up about the devolved protections for NHS and teaching staff, but not NJC, and making representations about that for protection. Then there was the Ed Psych one, which is the wording that you suggested about a compromise on like to protect this budget heading because of the pressures from the pandemic crisis. The next one I've got then is sorry, just scrolling through a couple which fell. We've got the COM one then, which we've just gone through, which was that the should be removed and spread over the 3 years if it can't be removed. The narrative cutting the play areas being removed because of the capital programme investment. The 3 years starting from 22-23 onwards, and then the that it comes to scrutiny for monitoring and in as a subject sooner rather than later. And then the pest control service, this proposal that the recommendation that this is held while Cabinet review the whole policy regarding pending the review of the process.
And I think John's fees.
Oh, sorry, I've missed that one out. I've got it written down. I haven't highlighted it. The fees and charges, the recommendation that the fees and charges policy be reviewed to remove the +1%.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Meryl. Yeah, Amanda, you wanted to say something on this?
Yeah, apologies, you might have covered it because I was late into the meeting, but we discussed last week, and I raised a concern, and I know Lynn raised it as well, about the linking the safe routes to school and the school transport, because we said we need to look at that because there are savings to be made there with simple fixes on safe routes where we're sending children on buses. And again, this is like the CAT transfers. I've asked for how much we're spending on busing these children. Now in Coity, we've been busing these children for 5 years, and that's never going to end. How much are we spending on this? instead of putting a crossing point in or a bit of a pavement. So we need to be looking at a recommendation, because Lindsay did say, oh yes, it's something we've been looking at.
Yeah.
But he told me that 3 years ago.
Yeah. What would be your recommendation, Amanda?
That there is a working party actively looking on this, not just putting every year saying we're looking at it. We need some deadlines, because otherwise we'll be looking at it in year 3000.
Yeah,
you know?
no, I agree. Meryl, perhaps you could just pass
so this, can you remind me which EFS it was? Sorry, Councillor. It was the home to school transport one, wasn't it?
It's on EFS 2, I think.
Right, just one moment.
Yeah, and just that a working group be allocated.
Yes, sorry, I've got that one. So, so that we make a recommendation then that with regard to that savings proposal, that a working group actively look at safe routes to schools.
Yeah.
And how those savings can be mitigated, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, a capital investment in a safe crossing and a pavement would pay for itself within, you know, a couple of years, instead of us paying ad infinitum.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sorry, Chair, isn't it EFS 1 rather than EFS 2?
Hang on. Now that was the statutory distances for free travel.
But EFS 2 is about removal of escorts. Doesn't it fit more under 1 than 2?
Yes, I think it's 1, isn't it?
Yeah, it could well go under 1. I mean, the most important thing is they know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Thank you.
It is school transport, end of.
That's fine.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anything else?
We've got. I think we've got to the end of the meeting, and can I thank all of you that are still here? And I know people have had to leave through no fault of their own, because they have other meetings. But can I thank every one of you very much for all your contributions? I know this year has not been normal in terms of this, but I think we've done the best that we could under the circumstances. So